Welcome back to HPP, the podcast that covers college basketball and the NBA draft inside and out. I am Rich Harris, and thank you for joining us again. Today, I am joined by Drew Barton, the Bay Area Bomber, who's turning into a golf expert. Do you play? Do you play? Because I love the game, but my back doesn't let me play as much as
I have played 9 holes of golf in my life.
Wow.
And did it. The first time I did it was in September of 2023. I went with my girlfriend's dad and brother-in-law. We were up in not Redmond. Was it? We were up visiting her grandparents for a long weekend. And it happened to be my girlfriend's birthday that weekend
up
as well.
In Big Sky Country, or I know you went up.
Yeah, up in the Oregon area. I'm drawing a blank.
Okay, no problem.
9 holes.
Wow. Sometimes I used to play 27 in a day, in the heat of summer when I was your age, but not anymore. So you had to cover. You got drug into to golf events this week because of everyone spread out all over the country with your wrestling and girls team and men's basketball team, right? Is that it?
I gotta be careful. I'll be diplomatic. They needed somebody to kind of hold it all together behind the scenes, and they thought who better. We actually hosted a tournament at the same location, same general setup and regulations and whatnot in the fall. And to set that up, I was up till 2:30 the morning before trying to set up the back end of that. So the life of a small school SID is filled with a lot. My job is a lot of things.
Well, aren't you?
Boring?
Is it your title, head of basketball operations and communications for men's basketball?
That's where it gets interesting. So that title was assigned to me directly by the basketball staff, but we had an SID, a third one, who kind of took lead on all the golf stuff because our golf coach and him had a good relationship. And so, he was far more familiar with golf as just a player operator of how to do these tournaments. Unfortunately, we let him go earlier in the year, and I guess the plan was going to be next man up, even though next man had that much training, that much experience. Wasn't it went smooth.
Too bad.
There's definitely. Too bad
I don't live close to you. I could step in to do these things because, especially golf. I know what the hell I'm doing. So.
Yeah, there's just a lot of using software that's a bit on the archaic side.
Oh boy.
There's the fact that I'm not super familiar with the game. I mean, I know very basic terminology, a lot of it that I've learned within the last 8 months, really. So that didn't make it easy, but we got through it. Our women's team actually won the tournament. There were 10 entries for the men as teams, and I think 5 or 6 teams for the women. Our women won, which was good. You always love to see the athletes, do well. That's why, at the end of the day, the most fun part about my job, even when it's away from hoop, is I get to be around the athletes and watch them win. It makes my job easy. With all that being said, definitely looking to get myself to a more basketball-centric life sooner rather than later.
I hear you. So my excitement while we were gone was I went to my alma mater, which happens to be not too far from me in Pennsylvania. I live in Jersey. My alma mater, East Stroudsburg, is in Pennsylvania in the Pocono Mountains, because they are a top 10 team in Division II. I believe their record is 20-2, and I believe both of their losses were really close. Now, they didn't play. I was surprised. I was curious if they played any D1 teams in the area, like Lehigh or Lafayette, and they didn't. So, but I will tell you, Drew, if you put uniforms on them that said Lehigh or Lafayette, or I'm trying to even think of something better, Drexel, schools like that, and if you put Drexel uniforms on them, the only thing you would have probably noticed, you would be like, this is kind of a short D1 team, because I'd say their biggest big is 6'8", and the guy who normally plays center is really a wing, and he's 6'6". But in terms of skill, I mean, there were some fantastic passes, some fantastic dunks, great 3-point shooting. And the funny thing is, I went to watch their two stars, probably two guys that are in the running for at least all conference. I probably not all American, because the team is so good that there's not one certain player that stands out. But their two best players, who I think are definitely locks to be all conference. And those two guys had so-so games. In fact, both got in foul trouble. One got in foul trouble early, so he barely played in the first half. And I ended up being impressed by about 4 other guys. And I'm like, from the 6'8" guy who comes in to play backup center to, their guards. And their guards are like good size. We're not talking like, 5'10", 5'11". We're talking like 6'2", 6'3", 6'4". And they're gifted. So I was really impressed. I doubt I'm going to see them play super high level competition in D2, because their conference championship is going to be held way out west in Pennsylvania, farther west in Pittsburgh. Yeah. So that's like a plane ride, not a car drive. And right. And then who knows where they're going to be when they get invited to the D2 big dance. So I'm going to keep an eye on them. I've been invited to come back to see a game. I've been invited to practice. Might even have the coach and a couple of the star players on the show before they get into postseason. So
awesome.
Yeah, and they played their rival, Westchester. Final score, I mean, this is a team that likes to press and run. Final score was like, and Westchester's a good team, and in Philly. And most of these guys in that game were from the Philly area. Final score was East Stroudsburg 103, Westchester 78. Yeah, and we're talking about a good team, and they just destroyed them.
Well, I think it's fun because, like, I relate to the, we talk so much about, like, obviously a focus on the draft, a focus on March Madness, where you're seeing like the creme de la creme of, amateur athletes in the country. But I mean, working in the NAIA, soon to be D2, we play a schedule that consists of all D2 NAIA programs. We even played Santa Clara this year. But like, our center's 6'8". And he actually just won player of the week. Just for the week, he averaged 25.5 and 11 or 13.5 boards. And, again, not to say that he could go play at Santa Clara or St. Mary's or Stanford or Cal and do that. But it's like, there's really good basketball players everywhere. And I tell people a lot of times, the number one difference is actually usually just the physical attributes of size, jumping ability, speed. That's like the number one difference. Obviously, skill is right there. I mean, you go to the D1 level, you have bigs that are 7 foot tall, able to step out and knock down a three, or guys that are 6'8" and run the court in 4 strides, they're dunking. But like, its size is actually the biggest thing that people don't realize. Is like, you think 6'8" good size, but 6'8" in Division I is a wing. 6'8" in D2, NAI, D3 is your starting center probably.
The last time East Stroudsburg was really good, when I looked in Real GM, their guys were starring in Germany. Now, I don't know, I don't think any of them were in the BBL, but they had just got there. So they're like, their first couple of years in the Germany's second division, they were putting up like 18 and 7 and, and shooting well.
Really good numbers, man.
Yeah. Now, whether they advanced to the BBL or not, I don't know. I'm going to have to look to see, but they're D2 players. It is not uncommon for real good D2 players to go over to Europe and make a living. And I feel, and not that I want, I don't don't want to encourage people to leave my alma mater, but I really do believe that, there was at least 3 or 4 guys on that team that definitely could play at the D2 level. Or D1 level? Now, would they star? Probably not, but I think they could play at that level. So, all right. So I want to bring up another thing before we move into our college hoops notebook. Is we were supposed to have a special co-host today, and that was Toledo senior guard Dante Maddox. Now we've talked about it, about him being on the show probably for, I don't know, last month. Now, I just want to remind people, you'll hear me say a lot of times, we're going to have so-and-so on the show, or we're going to do this next week, or we're going to do that next week. And it never happens, or it happens like 2 months after I first mentioned it. We don't have the manpower to do everything that we're trying to do sometimes. And in the case of Dante, he's in the middle of the season, fighting to get into the NCAA tournament, and he had to cancel on us today. But I just wanted to give him a shout out. He's a communications major, by the way, and we're hoping that maybe he'll do his internship with us this summer. But anyway, Dante currently ranks in the top 10 of the MAC for points per game at 16, steals per game at nearly 2, free throw shooting 85%, true shooting over 58%, win shares plus minus, and offensive rating. So he's in the top 10 of the MAC for all those things. He scored 20 or more points in 5 of the last 9 games, and was one of the leading candidates to be an all-MAC selection this year. Of course, Toledo Rockets are in second place in the MAC, trailing Akron by 1 game. And next week, Akron won the first time they played. And next week, they meet again in what will be a critical showdown to get the top seed in the MAC tournament. So Dante and I agreed, instead of continuing to try to match up schedules, he's like, yeah, it's looking like we're going to have to do this after the season. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to have Dante on after the season's over, when he won't get things popping up. So I apologize to fans, but we will have Dante eventually. All right, so now let's move on to the college hoops notebook. And I have in here, for the first item, I wrote parity and chaos still reign. And now, admittedly, we're doing this show on Wednesday when we had planned to do it on Tuesday. And I wrote the script Tuesday afternoon. Now, since then, a lot of the things that happened on Tuesday night kind of have already altered what I said. So I was just going to kind of just go over last night's results to some degree and see if Drew has any comment. One of the biggest things that happened was Syracuse finally got a much needed big win by winning at home against North Carolina. Baylor crushed Oklahoma. And what I find interesting about this is I thought Oklahoma was the type of team that was going to give them trouble. And that was based on what I saw them do to BYU. Oh, I was really impressed with Oklahoma's ability to shut down the 3-point shooting of BYU. Well, last night Baylor shot better than 50% from 3. And so, yeah, that didn't add up. So, yeah, what else happened last night that was interesting?
Virginia lost to Pitt.
Right. Virginia lost to Pitt, and Wisconsin snapped their 4-game losing streak, which we were going to talk about, but we can still talk about that a little. Kentucky broke their losing streak, their 3-game losing streak, by beating Ole Miss pretty handily. Here's another thing we were going to talk about, and that was Indiana State finally breaking into the top 25 for the first time since Larry Bird was there in 1979, and they promptly lose to Illinois State, who's not even a good Missouri Valley Conference team, and they were home. They were home, Drew, and they lost to yeah, it's, I mean, the Missouri Valley has like 6 good teams, and Illinois State isn't one of them. And they lose at home handily, 80-67. What the hell's going on around here? Let's see what else we have. Vanderbilt beat Texas A&M after
that's right.
After Texas A&M whooped up on Tennessee.
Tennessee.
Yeah,
that's right.
Who
just beat Kansas? Somebody just beat. Was it Texas Tech?
That was Texas Tech on Monday night, and I was going to talk about that a little. That's about it for the surprises. So now back to the script. The first thing I have on there, and this still stands, at least for now, South Carolina has won 7 straight and is now tied with Alabama for first place in the SEC. And I don't think we can ignore this because, we keep on saying show me something when you beat Tennessee. Show me something when you beat Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what? South Carolina's done both of those things and more. I don't quite know how they're doing it because they don't. To me, their players just don't stand out to me. But we got to give them some props here.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really ignore the resume, but I think the way they're doing it is I think they're just kind of doing it. And when I say like by committee, I don't mean that to like say nobody's playing well. I know like Michi Johnson statistically is putting up a solid stat line. Who's the other forward that they have?
Well, they have BJ Mack came
That's
in
the one I'm thinking
transfer.
of. He's playing pretty well.
And Talon Cooper, the transfer from Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I said, Cam and I did the SEC preview, and he was saying how bad South Carolina was and how they were still going to be bad. And I said, well, no, I don't think they're going to finish in last place. I don't. I said, Cam, I think they're going to be better this year. And one of the things I pointed out was Talon Cooper was a very steady presence. And I don't know what his turnover, assist to turnover ratio is this year, but that team doesn't usually beat itself. And a lot of it is because Cooper has not only been shooting well, but he doesn't turn the ball over and he keeps that offense running.
4.4 assists to 1.2 turnovers a game in terms of his per averages. And he's also slashing 51 from the floor, 76 from the free throw line, and 46 from three. I don't know the volume from three, but he's been super efficient.
Right. And then, of course, they also have Colin Murray Boyles, another big man. So they kind of use Mack and Boyles as kind of like their two bigs. And Murray Boyles has been getting better and better as the season has gone on. Now, again, not a spectacular player. None of these guys are going to, except for maybe Michi Johnson's ability to maybe hit from midcourt every once in a while. None of these players are going to wow you. But they just do the right things and they play some really terrific defense.
I mean, they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, or was it 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 guys have all played at least 15 games and are all averaging double digits of minutes per game. That basically tells you this team can go, if you 10 deep, 8, 9, and obviously rotations get shortened at certain times, but if you're able to deploy 10 guys and trust them, 10 minutes is a decent amount of basketball to be on the court. It's not 30 per game, but you're out there for 10 minutes. You are taking on a full shift with responsibilities and things you have to do.
You're probably the transition guy if there were quarters. There were quarters, they're you come in late in the first quarter, play the early part of the second quarter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So and again, I haven't seen this team play a lot. I've only saw them play twice this year. So I'm not super familiar with the players, but when I see stuff, my basketball brain tells me that these guys are deep, they don't hurt themselves, and they've got a variety of different guys that can come in and do things at any moment's notice. And that's the recipe for success because you're not so reliant on just one or two guys carrying the load. I think that's something that kind of Kansas runs into at times is they're so reliant on their big dogs to carry such a load that if they are just okay, you kind of wonder where the production is going to come from. But if Michi Johnson's a bad game, Cooper and Mack are both in double figures. They've got 3 other guys all around 6 to 9 point. Like you can survive.
I think Murray Boyles put up over 30 over the weekend.
He did, and he's up to about 9 points, 5 boards a game, close.
Right. And the thing about him is he 18 or 19? He's 19. So a young 19 though. So and it's been obvious he's been getting better and better as the season has gone on. So all right, another team that's starting a surge is Rutgers, and they have the interesting thing that happened. If you remember back in the summer, there was the gambling scandal that involved some players at Iowa State and Iowa. Well, Jeremiah Williams, who was a transfer from Iowa State to Rutgers, was one of those guys involved in that. And I don't know why he just became eligible. Maybe he had to do community service or something like that, and Rutgers wasn't going to let him play until he did all that. But Rutgers is 3-0 since this kid. Now this kid hadn't played didn't play last year because of injury. So the last time we saw him was at Temple. And he's a 6'4" guard, can shoot, can defend, never been stellar. But right now he's 3-game sample, of course, but he's Rutgers' leading scorer. And he's been able to give them something, that they haven't had. And that's a nice, reliable perimeter option to match up with a team that already plays great defense. And so they're 3-0, including the shellacking they gave Wisconsin over the weekend. So, Rutgers right now is kind of still off the bubble radar, but with a couple more wins, I think they're back in the running.
Yeah, I mean, I know that this is the next point, but it's going to be interesting to see as this season goes on. Is this going to be a moment where we say it says more about Rutgers or it says more about Wisconsin? Because Wisconsin's and not, and again, not to that's not taking anything away from Rutgers, but
no, that's a valid point. That's a valid point. Yeah. But what I'm saying, they've also strung together, 3 wins. Sure. So it's not just Wisconsin. But one thing I wanted to talk about now, of course, Wisconsin got right last night over Ohio State. It's been a huge disappointment this year. I thought for sure Ohio State was going to be a tournament team.
Just fired their coach.
Did they really?
Yeah, you didn't hear about that? Yeah.
No.
Just this morning.
Wow.
Yeah, they just fired their coach. What's his name?
He had been there for a long time.
Holtmann?
Yeah, Chris Holtmann.
Holtmann. Yeah, they just fired him this morning. Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah. So I'm very curious to see, that was interesting to me because they've been a disappointment, but I was like, he had been successful. He had been successful in previous years. It's like, so I wonder if there was did he completely lose the locker room and player? I don't know. I'm just curious because I didn't see that coming.
Well, over the weekend they beat close, but they beat Maryland. It went in overtime.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, maybe they righted the ship. But that team is young. It's mostly underclassmen. Except for Battle and Zed Key, both of whom we've had on the show, by the way. So I was actually talking to their SID yesterday, Gary Pettit. And the reason I is because we were going to have Bruce Thornton or somebody, one of their better young players on the show. And I said to Gary, maybe we should hold off a while. And I think they have a week break coming up toward the end of the month, going into March.
Yeah.
And I said, you got a week off coming up in a few weeks. Why don't we wait till then? And maybe we'll have some more positive things to talk about. Now, he gave me no indication that their coach is getting fired. That I did not see coming because, Chris Holtz had some pretty good success with that team. I know they underachieved last year, but Sensabaugh got hurt. They were rolling pretty good. Then when Sensabaugh got hurt, they had some other injuries too. And then if you remember, they really turned it on and almost won the Big Ten tournament.
Mm-hmm. They made a run. When Sensabaugh came back, right?
Was he?
Or was he?
Yeah, but then I think he got hurt again. Yeah, it was mostly Thornton and Roddy Gale. And, of course, they also have Felix Akpara at center. All those, they're probably their 3 best players. Maybe not at this point, but maybe in terms of long-term potential. Yeah. All sophomores, all either 19 or 20. And, of course, they also have a couple of they have about 3 other really highly regarded recruits that haven't even played because of injury or because there's just not room for them, and in the rotation. And of course they have Zed Key and Jeremiah Battle. Now the thing about Battle has done well. I think he leads the Big Ten in 3-point shooting, or 3-pointers made at least. Zed Key lost so much weight. He actually doesn't look healthy. I almost mentioned that to Gary yesterday. I was like, I watched Zed and he doesn't look right. He doesn't look healthy. So I don't know. Zed has not been starting. They've been starting Felix Akpara ahead of him. So that's something I never, saw coming. Ohio State's got a lot of talent, and whoever coaches that team, as long as he can keep those guys there, they have the potential to be a top 4 Big Ten team in the future. So we'll move on to the other Big Ten team that I want to talk about this week, and that's Wisconsin. Even though they beat Ohio State and got Chris Holtmann fired, nice, Wisconsin, nice. Does that make you happy they got a coach fired? But yeah, they had lost 4 straight. And, I talked about, a few weeks ago when you were picking your Final Four, I think, I was saying, Wisconsin to me was a sneaky team to potentially get to the Final Four. But at the time, I was thinking more like Elite 8. And when we've talked about them, at least in my opinion, this team is much more offensively gifted than it is defensively gifted.
Without a doubt.
And, they have shooters all over the place. But here's the thing. Let's look at that. AJ Storr, who we had on Who's Hot, he's averaging 16 points per game, but he's only shooting 30% from 3. Stephen Crowell, their center, is shooting 44% from deep, but he's only taking 1.5 attempts per game. Max Kleischmidt, he's been doing well. No argument there. Over 4 attempts a game, 40%. John Blackwell, freshman, is taking less than 2 a game, but he's shooting 48% from deep. But here's the thing. He's missed the last 2 games with an injury. So he was at least missed one of those games during the losing streak, and he has a hip injury, and there's no word when he's coming back. But then the guy who's supposed to stir the drink, Chucky Hepburn, he's taken over 3 a game, only 28%. And then you have Connor Essegian, who was one of the best freshmen in the Big Ten last year. Essegian is down to 8 minutes a game this year. He was also one of the best 3-point shooters in the Big Ten last year. So he's only playing 8 minutes a game, and he's only shooting 32% from deep. So a lot of these guys, and you also have the backup big man, Nolan Winters. He is taking 1.5 threes a game, and he's only making 29%. So I think what you're seeing here is a team that really doesn't play typical Wisconsin defense. And when their offense goes south, they're shooting, as we know with these shooting teams, they can beat anybody and they can lose to anybody. And BYU is another example,
I watched Cincinnati beat the crap out of BYU because all BYU wanted to do was camp out and hug threes. And that game, I think, is the only time I've seen BYU, maybe one other time, play like a full game. And that right there was why I'm like, yeah, I think this team's overrated because you can't trust that.
Well, see, now Oklahoma, when I saw them, the last time I saw BYU is when they lost at Oklahoma. Oklahoma wouldn't let them breathe on the 3-point line. Fus Traore had a nice game inside, probably scored over 20 points inside, but they were willing to let him do that.
Absolutely.
They played him one-on-one, and we were like, we're not leaving your shooters. If you want to beat us inside with 2s, go right ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Like, that's why I said, like, when they're hot, and I don't know what the percentages are, during their, when they rattled off the win streak, got up to, was it 6th in the nation? I don't know what the 3-point percentages were, but now you just look and it's like, it's just such an unreliable way to play. I mean, losing to Purdue in a pretty competitive game by 6, I don't think anybody's, nobody's going to look at that and be like, oh, bad loss.
No, but Purdue basically had control of that game the whole time.
Yeah,
kind of like
exactly.
From start to finish.
But I think most pundits have Purdue and UConn kind of on another plane than everybody else,
right.
Which is fair. But like Michigan, I've seen Michigan a couple of times this year. They are not good.
No, they're not.
Like, they are not a good team.
No, by the way, how does Chris Holtmann get fired before Juwan Howard? How does that happen?
That Fab Five status must run deep. I actually agree. That's a really good point. Michigan's been nothing but a disappointment for the most part with him at the helm. But yeah, I don't know. Like, that's why I made the comment. It'll be more telling. Like, this team. There's still plenty of games left. They still got to play Illinois. They still got to go to Purdue. They got to play Maryland. Like, there's still a chance for them to kind of right the ship. And it's always hard with teams like this. Like, you look at their overall resume. They've been really solid all year, and even their losses outside this losing streak, they lost to Arizona, okay. Lost to Tennessee early, okay. I mean, people forget that UConn last year, who was a buzzsaw in the tournament, had a point where they lost like 5 of 6 or something like that. So it'll be interesting, but I think that this team, as a sneaky Final Four pick, I think we can kind of put that one to rest because it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
can they play at
Well,
the
here's the
right
thing.
offensive
If
level?
they, just like BYU though, if they got hot
Yeah,
at the right time. But here's what I see as a problem with Wisconsin, that say for a team like Purdue. We know Purdue can always get a bucket on the inside, and then if
yeah,
you try to stop that, they have plenty of guys who can light it up from deep. Wisconsin doesn't have that interior force guy. Their best interior scorer is Tyler Wall, and he's like a 6'6", 6'7" power forward. Their center is really a stretch guy, and that's Stephen Crowell, and he is only shooting 55% from the floor, which is nice, but it's not super for a big. But here's an example of how he doesn't like to play in the paint. He's only getting fouled 2.7, only going to the foul line 2.7 times per game. There's like 3 other guys on the team that, including, actually, I'm looking, there's only 1, 2, yeah, there's 3 other guys on the team that go to the line more. And one of them is Blackwell, the freshman guard,
yeah.
who only plays 18 minutes a game. So, Crowell isn't physical. He's not a great shot blocker, even though he's like a 7-footer. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's where this Wisconsin team falls short, is in the paint.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, you got to be dynamic. You got to be more dynamic than you can't. Again, I just don't. Just like I give teams that are so defensive minded and offensively kind of limited, I give them the same eyebrow raise of like, can you do it 6 games in a row when it matters? I think offensively it's kind of the same way because it's like, do you really want to get into shooting contests, especially when you're so reliant from 3, and like that's tough to do, man. And the teams get better, so they can beat. It's like it's the same adage, and it's kind of been the way all year. They could beat anybody on any given night, but I think any of the other top 40 teams in the country can get them on any given night because
right.
they just kind of have one way to beat you.
Yeah. So in the crazy AAC, which has like teams like Charlotte and South Florida at the top, along way ahead of Memphis in the standings, and up there with FAU. FAU actually just lost again. UAB has now beaten Memphis and FAU. They lose to UAB, and now they fall behind South Florida. South Florida, who had a close game with Charlotte earlier in the week to take first place, and they were tied with FAU, but FAU now falls behind South Florida in the standings in the AAC. Interestingly, the computers hate South Florida, okay, and the computers consider FAU a lock to make the tournament, and I do too. But interesting, they'll play this week for first place. So I don't know if you have any comments there. I just thought it's been a crazy conference.
FAU, I think the people say like you got to play down your competition. I think FAU literally is that to a T. Like you look at their resume and you go, you've had 2 overtime games. One you lost to UAB. They went to overtime with Wichita. You beat North Texas by 3, but you blow out Tulsa by 32. But then you go to overtime with who did they went to overtime again. This team to me just doesn't do a very good job of just kind of like just taking care of business. There's a level of playing down.
Well, they do a better job than Memphis, because Memphis.
Well, but that's kind of the Memphis MO. I think I've been kind of out on Memphis ever since my boy Drew Timmy gave him the work back when Jalen Duren was there in the tournament. I just think that like you look at this team and go, we talked about John Davis. Was it last week?
Yeah, last week.
And all agreed that he's a great player. They've got I don't know if there's any roster on paper, maybe Memphis, but that's a whole different conversation. That's like that should be as talented and competitive with these guys. And yet, even when they do win, you're beating Tulane by 1. You're beating, North Texas by 3. So I just don't know, and those teams kind of scare me because it's like it's a lot easier to turn something down than it is to turn it on. And you can't play with your food like this come March. You can't. It's you're gonna run into a good team or you're gonna run into a hungry team. And if you think, oh, well, we're better, we got to the Final Four, oh, we're fine, it's not gonna work like that. And I think that this year, I was much higher on. They had that Bryant loss early in the year, and I remember being on the show saying, not really worried about it. It was a really bad shooting night from basically all their best players. Sure enough, the next day they beat A&M, who was number 12 in the nation, or not the next day, but it was the next day. It's the next day because it was one of those tournaments. They beat A&M, pretty handily, and I was like, see, I'm not worried. But now I'm going. You can't. This bothers me, and this is maybe more of like a coaching side, having been around the game on like the operation, seeing it like. I'll be honest, like my Menlo team kind of does this. We kind of play to the level of competition. When we should be crushing guys by 15, 20, we beat them by 3. And then we screw around and we end up losing by 2 to a team that we should beat. So talent is there. I agree. I don't think they're at too much of a risk to miss the tournament. They do have some good wins on their resume. No. They're still going to be the favorite to win the conference. But in terms of them making some noise in March, the way they're playing right now and the way they're operating, like this is a team you go like they could lose in the first day.
Yeah.
And they have the talent. They have the talent though to go make a Sweet 16 or an Elite 8 run again. But they could lose in the first day the way that they're playing.
Yeah, if you can lose to UAB, you can. Yeah. I mean, I'm nothing against UAB, but I mean, UAB just doesn't have I mean, of course they've been playing pretty well lately, especially in conference, but. UAB really stunk it up, early in the season.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. All right. So our last topic in our chaos topic is USC loses to Stanford by 31 and falls to 3-10 in the Pac-12. I know we've touched on it a couple times, but I'm hoping maybe being on the West Coast, you have a little more insight than I do. What the hell is wrong with this team? And do you think, just like I would have never thought Chris Holtmann would get fired, do you think Andy Enfield's in danger of getting fired?
I think he has to be on the hot seat. I'm not saying he's going to get fired. I'm not saying, but I don't know how you have a season like this and you aren't, especially for a coach who hasn't, they've been. When the Mobley brothers were there, USC was competitive, but they didn't do anything spectacular when they were there. I think they made a Sweet 16 run. Maybe Elite 8 run somewhere during the Mobley era. Maybe I know that my Zags bumped him out when Evan was there, and I think that was in the Sweet 16. Maybe the Elite 8. But you kind of have to be because this is incredibly embarrassing in my opinion.
Yeah.
The pack is pretty down when you look at it. Arizona is another one of those teams that hasn't been able to really figure it out. I think talent wise, you're this team could make a Final Four, Elite 8. Talent wise, no problem, but they fluctuate, week in and week out. Colorado started off the year on those preseason polls as high as 18, I think, and have good players, but they haven't really been able to put it together. UCLA is down. Oregon had injuries throughout the year early to their best players. You just go down the list. Stanford's kind of Stanford. Cal's fully in a rebuild. They're better, but they're still. Mark Madsen's got his work cut out. He's got another 3-4 years before that ship is righted. And this is what you're doing.
How do you bring back basically what was a successful team last year? Did they lose anybody?
Drew Peterson.
Oh, right. They lost Drew Peterson.
They did lose Drew Peterson.
Right. But they bring in Collier. They bring in Bronny James.
Yeah.
And you have Vincent Iwachukwu, who came in as the top 25 guy, had trouble with injuries and so forth last year. You expect him to take a leap. He is a non-factor this year. If anything, sometimes the team seems better off without him. You have Joshua Morgan, who's the conference's leading shot blocker, returning. You have Boogie Ellis, who's one of the best scoring guards in the country, returning. You have Kobe Johnson, who's supposed to be one of the best defenders in the country, returning. And so is it Enfield or is it you bring in Rodman, or is it this weird combination of guys who all have NBA connections? So you have Kobe Johnson's brothers, Jalen Johnson, and Rodman's father was an NBA star, and Bronny James, of course, his father is one of the all-time greats in the NBA. Do all these, kind of pampered guys, are they? And then you have Collier, who comes in as the number one recruit. Is this a bad kind of combination where you have these guys that are used to, I don't know. Would you want to coach Bronny James' son? Bronny James? I wouldn't. Because he's always going to be going to his father. He's not going to listen to me. He's going to listen to his father.
For sure.
But they also, Rodman, James, and all them have lived pampered lives. Do you really want to coach guys that have lived pampered lives? I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, like, I get the sense that this team is very clearly. I don't know if they give up on their coach. I think they've given up on this season. I don't see any fight really. Like,
but do you think it's Enfield? Do you think it's a combination, or do you think it's Collier? Because something keeps on telling me, I have no evidence of this. All we've heard is dysfunction. Mm-hmm. But the one thing I saw when things started going south for this team was I noticed that Collier was a powder.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then things really, and Boogie Ellis and him, it didn't seem like they could coexist. If Collier had a good game, Boogie didn't. And if Boogie had a good game, Collier didn't. So my heart tells me say something. It's something about Collier, but I could be wrong. It could be where everybody goes home to their pro brother or their pro father and says, "Oh, he told me we had to do this," and the father or the brother says, "Oh, that's stupid. That has nothing to do with being in the NBA. Don't listen to him."
Yeah. Well, I think it's just an issue. I actually was looking at an article I was reading that popped up on my Twitter feed, and I think it speaks to a larger issue for college basketball. And it was basically looking at what's more this year, who has been more effective, transfers and freshmen. And across the board, transfers are, and again, to a college basketball person, it's to be expected because transfers are generally people that they're either fifth years or usually they're upperclassmen who are maybe, high mid-major guys making the jump to Power 5, whatever it is. But I think the general discourse is that, like, the way of the high school recruit and the freshman is just with things like Overtime Elite, with things like the G League now where kids are going directly, like, it's a bit of a watered down pool. And like a guy like Collier, like, he doesn't care about college basketball. I don't think Collier cares about college basketball. I'm willing to say that. This was a one and done stop for him to get in and get out. Bronny James might have thought the same way to a degree. Now, there's no way that dude should be getting drafted, but who freaking knows? But, like, I just think that this, like, you bring in these freshmen and you're giving freshmen the helm. You're putting freshmen at the helm. You're like, we're going to tie our, to a degree, our ship to Isaiah Collier. We see it at Kentucky, all these freshmen. And I just don't think it's conducive in today's landscape of college basketball. Is Isaiah Collier going to be a better NBA prospect than Graham Ike is? Sure. But Graham Ike or Ryan Nembhard are far more impactful in the college game because they're grown men who've been doing this now for a couple of years. And so I just think that USC has a combination of not the right attitude that may stem from a lot of these guys kind of being told, for years, you got next, or you grew up in an NBA household, you're a basketball prodigy. The coach is clearly not putting a game plan together that is working at all. It hasn't at all this year. So I don't really know.
When you lose to Stanford by 31,
the players quit.
The players aren't playing.
The players quit. Like I said, I think the players have quit on the season. I can't speak about. I'm not in that locker room.
But how does that not hurt Collier? Because to me, I am so unimpressed by him. Some people had him number 1 overall on their draft boards. He's not number 1 on anybody's draft board now.
Oh, it definitely hurts him. But again, we've seen it so many times where you can literally get away with, murder to a degree, and it doesn't impact anything. So people are going to look at the fact that Collier, they got blown out by 30, but he had 18 points for 4 boards. Oh, okay. So he can put, that's what I think that's where people kind of, it gets mistaken. And I think part of the issue is, again, it goes back to the notion of, with this, I guess, kind of generation of hoopers, kind of the degree of, well, it isn't your fault. It's the coach's fault, or it's their fault. It's your teammates' fault. You had 18-4. It can't be on you. You scored 18 points. You grabbed 4 boards, which was a team high, funny enough, in
Well,
that
I'll
game.
tell you what. I mean, the first person you look to when a team loses is the point guard.
And especially in college,
It's like the quarterback. It's like the quarterback.
I agree. In college, it absolutely, because it's more, it's a game to find more position. It's more position based. In the NBA nowadays, is there even really a point guard in half these teams? Everyone's just kind of
whoever's bringing up the ball and doing the distributing, that's the point guard. I don't care.
But like in college basketball though, there are people that, like, it is an undisputed fact that Ryan Nembhard is the point guard at Gonzaga. That is the floor general. He is running that show. So I think that's where it's like, I don't know. This team has been a travesty. I'm pissed off because this was supposed to be a great quad one win for my guys, and now it doesn't even look like a quad win. It looks like it should have been a JV team playing. So I'm like, great, this doesn't do anything for my Zags getting into the tournament. But it's just a disappointment. Like you said, you lose Drew Peterson on the show, hell of a player collegiately, but it's like there's no way that this should be the outcome, especially because the rest of the pack isn't. It's not like the rest of the pack is dominating.
You know what this reminds me of? And this was an Andy Enfield guy. Who was the guy played for USC? He was clearly out for himself, clearly didn't play team ball. Was an absolute disappointment. Was supposed to be like a top 10 pick, drops all the way down, I think, to either late first, early second. And now he's out of the league. He played with the Rockets. He was Kevin Porter? Not Kevin Porter.
It was Kevin Porter.
Now how do you like that? Yes. How do you like that? This is a guy who's supposed to be a top 10 pick like 4 or 5 years ago. 4 years ago. We can't even remember his name now.
Yeah.
Now that says a lot more about him than it does about our memories.
Yeah, it was Kevin Porter Jr. Back in like the 18-19.
Porter. And so if Isaiah Collier thinks he's going to be, it's all his future's written out for him, he might want to review Kevin Porter's resume, because this reminds me a lot of that.
I mean, I think the bill always comes due to some degree. If you don't love and respect the game of basketball, and that goes into everything of being a good teammate, being coachable, you can still get to the league. You can even be in the league for a while. But I think you see it with so many, like, how many of these like young promising stars are we starting to realize, like, I don't think anybody questions if Steph Curry loves basketball. I don't think anyone questions if, there's these guys love that. But like, you look at guys like LaMelo and Zion, and you're like, do you love basketball, or do you love the things basketball gives you?
Yeah.
The status, and I think that's like, you run the risk of like, Collier's going to get in the league. He's going to be a first round pick, no matter what we say, barring something crazy coming out. And again, that might not stop it from happening.
It didn't stop Porter, even though he got in trouble at USC multiple times. And
so, I think it's just a matter of guys like this.
You can be involved in murder and still be the second overall pick in the NBA draft.
Yeah. So I think for me, Ben Simmons is a great example of a guy who quit on his team literally the moment they didn't make the tournament, withdrew from classes and left the school, got drafted, and look where that's at. So I'm not saying Collier is destined to follow the footsteps of, a Porter or Simmons, but there is a level of concern where it's guys like this. It's like, I'd almost like it more and have more respect if he said, that was an embarrassment. I'm coming back next year. We're making the tournament.
Oh, yeah.
My back.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. I would be all over that. I would be all over.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. But like, he's not.
But when does that happen? And I hate to rag on it, and you're going to get mad at me, but, there's something about West Coast guys. West Coast guys just don't seem to love the game as much as like Midwestern guys or maybe even guys in the Northeast. Maybe I'm generalizing way too much, but here's the thing: Andy Enfield has had, prospect after prospect after prospect come in there, and his team underachieves. I think it's time for Andy Enfield to go, and I don't think he's Mick Cronin has actually done pretty well. And they have similar styles. They like to play games in the 50s. They like the final score to be 60-55. To me, that's not Pac-12 Los Angeles basketball. Los Angeles basketball to me is Lakers type basketball, run and gun. And you bring in these, East Coast guys who like to grind it out. It doesn't mix.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is like, if you want to play that way, I don't think you should be hitching your team's wagon to Boogie Ellis and Isaiah Collier.
Exactly.
That is not going to work.
Like, exactly. Maybe the
reason it worked for Mick
and the most success he had was with the Mobleys. Okay. Yeah. But but he's not doing it. And man, I just
that's why I go back to the point with the freshmen is like, I think these coaches get so beholden to like, well, I got a 5-star kid, and if you bring those types of kids in, you kind of have to do something with you. You can't bring in Isaiah Collier and go, you're going to be the 7th man. Like you're going to have to start him, and he's going to have to get at worst the 2nd most touches on the team. And so it's like, it's almost like, are you selling out fit for just a big board? Like, are you just selling out fit for the number of stars next to a guy's name? Because I think what you see is like Mick Cronin had. The reason UCLA basketball the last couple of years is because they had guys like Jaime Jaquez, Tiger Campbell, Jalen Clark, who like fit the system that he wanted.
They were blue collar players. Yeah.
A true point guard in Tiger Campbell who plays hard, plays the right way. Guys like Clark and Jaquez who are going to defend, play physical. They have high profile games and they go to the NBA, but like they got Jaime Jaquez was not. You think of Jaime Jaquez, you think of a headband, long hair, grabbing rebounds, finishing through contact, playing in the paint. You think of Jalen Clark on the defensive side of the ball, So I think that's where you kind of got to find you got to match up that fit. You can't, and I think we're seeing it. You're seeing it with Kentucky, selling out entirely, just chasing star ratings.
What though? I got to disagree with you there. I see those kids at Kentucky giving full effort. I don't see I don't see them playing for themselves.
I'm saying from the standpoint of like, if you want to win, you're asking an 18-year-old kid to go toe-to-toe with 22, 23, 24-year-old grown men. I'm not saying just from the standpoint of how hard do you play, but like, of course they're going to process things slower. They're going to be physically outmatched. They might be a level of they're going to get outworked because they're going to go against guys going, this is it for me. I'm not a 5-star prospect going to the league, one and done my basketball career and gone for another 15 years. It's like when this is done, I'm probably putting on a suit and tie and selling insurance or something. So I'm just saying, like, when you tie your wagon to these kids, you have to take the risk of, are they truly invested when they're looking to get to the league? They're not meant, like, they're going against grown men who want this more than anything. And not that the kids don't, but it's like, Reed Sheppard can play as hard as he wants. He's not ripping a rebound away from Anton Watson. He's not guarding Anton Watson one-on-one in the post. It's just not happening. So that's more where I'm going. And not necessarily just diving on the difficulty of play.
And I think really the teams that are going to be successful moving forward are going to be the teams like Connecticut, where they mix in a couple of 5-stars with some really good college players. Yeah, you can't bring in 4 and 5 of these guys, and you certainly can't hitch your wagon to one of them and bet and put your season on them. Like, but here's one thing I will say, getting back to USC, and we can close on this note after you comment on it. But I think if Collier doesn't join USC and he does whatever he does, he's just not on USC. Preseason, we still would have probably said USC was a top 4 Pac-12 team and probably headed toward the tournament because they still have Boogie Ellis, they still have Kobe Johnson, and they have all those other youngsters from before that have yet to step up, but we figured they're going to step up. And really, all they would have lost is, Drew Peterson. Now, I don't mean I really love Drew's game. He was a great college player, and he's playing with the Celtics now in 2-way. I love Drew, and he was a great versatile player who could be like a big point guard, could be a power forward, but he would have been the only missing piece, and you would have been bringing in Bronny James and you would have had Iwachukwu, and I still think this is a team that could have gone far. But so I don't know if you have anything to add. It's really frustrating. They had a disappointment. I can't think of it. Well, you know what? the team that most frustrated me last year was North Carolina, and this has that. This is, but at least North Carolina was like on the bubble, this time of year. UCLA's on the bubble of falling into Division II. So, all right, let's get in the notebook. I just want to run over some injuries, some injury notes, and other notes. Benny Williams was dismissed from Syracuse this year. He was a forward, 6'8", 6'9", athletic guy, power forward, small forward. I thought it was going to be a big loss for Syracuse. Of course, then they go and beat North Carolina last night. But really, Syracuse was a really thin team, especially in terms of size. So, don't know what happened there, but yeah. Kevin McClure missed another game, missed Monday night's debacle for Kansas. By the way, we just touched on that slightly. Kansas has to play Baylor on a Saturday. This is 2 weeks in a row they had to play a top 20 team. And then 2 days later, only one day in between, then they have to go on the road and play. Was it the Texas Tech game on the road as well?
Yep, Texas Tech was at Texas Tech.
Oh my God, you should have seen the shooting. Like, Hunter Dickinson was like 2 of 12, and KJ Adams.
I was watching it in the corner of my eye after this. I was like on the back end of eating dinner, trying to figure out this freaking golf tournament round 2, and had the game on kind of. So I was watching it, and then as it got ugly, I kind of was like, I should probably just focus on work now.
Oh my God, it just they couldn't throw it in the ocean. So, but I really think, these last 2 Monday nights where we've seen them go down, they come up with a big win, at home, and then they go on the road against, a lesser team and lose. In this case, they got pounded. I just think it's like too much, with 1 day in between. Bill Self must be pulling his hair out saying, come on, stop putting me on Monday nights. But all right, so Travion Brazil, Arkansas's forward, hasn't played since January 24th due to knee soreness, and he's questionable for tonight's Tennessee game. So no word when he's coming back. Also, some not so great news for Miami, who's consistently had injury issues this year. Tonight, Keyshawn George, who's missed the past 2 games, and Nigel Pack, who got hurt in the game against North Carolina this past weekend, are both considered questionable for tonight's key matchup at Clemson. Trey Mitchell returned for Kentucky last night. He had some kind of back issue and played last night versus Ole Miss, but somewhere along the line, he suffered a left shoulder injury during the game. So not so sure if he's going to miss more time or not. Adama Ball didn't play on Saturday versus University of San Francisco. They had a nice brawl in that game. Did you see that?
Yeah, the Benjamin got tossed and suspended, I believe.
Yeah.
Point guard. Yeah, he also got tossed from the St. Mary's game, actually.
Yeah, there was like 6 guys ejected from the game. But anyway, Ball didn't even play that one. It turned out to be a really close game. Frisco won it by 1, which is actually kind of a credit to Santa Clara that they could keep it that close without their star player. So there's no word when Ball's coming back. We mentioned John Blackwell, the outstanding freshman for Wisconsin. He's missed the last 2 games with a hip injury. Not sure when he's returning. Dawson Garcia, you see what kind of injury he has? Drew, in the script, we have in parentheses man region, because not apparently, he took a really hard hit to the man region, and it was kind of funny. The rest of the game, they had him sitting on a padded seat. Most indications are that he should be able to play on Thursday at Purdue. Langston Love, and I'm not sure what's going on with Langston. He's had some knee issues in the past, and he had an eye issue. But he's missed the past 2 games, having a really nice year for Baylor, and there's no word on his return. And the worst news of the all is Ty Berry, sharpshooting guard for Northwestern, is out for the season with a knee injury. That's a killer for a team that really could shoot. And very much like Wisconsin, BYU, one of those teams that could beat anybody because of their outstanding shooting. Well, he's one of their key shooters, and it's not a deep team, and so a thin team gets thinner.
Yeah.
Any comments on any of those injuries?
I think the one that stands out the most, because I really like the program. I like Larinaga. I love the players that they have, but the Miami injuries, this could be the death knell for them. I know we kind of talked about they've been like right on that edge, like the talent's there. They could rattle off 4 or 5. They could do it, but they just cannot stay healthy. We've talked about it for weeks now. And again, now you have Keyshawn George, the freshman who has played really well for them, despite with all these injuries. He stepped up to help fill those gaps to the other, guards, the kind of wings that they have. And Nigel Pack, who's been, kind of their star point guard, is
really, really well against North Carolina. And by the way, we talked about Larinaga and his, his response to that shellacking they got by Virginia.
Yeah.
They played much better against North Carolina.
Yeah.
They were in it to the end. Just North Carolina I think ended up winning by 4 or so. And the one thing was, I think O'Meara got in foul trouble again, and they really just don't have anybody when he goes out of the game. O'Meara
goes out, and now you're basically asking the others to try to deal with Baycott and Ingram. It's not gonna work. Yeah. Elite starting front courts have trouble with those guys. You're asking guys that are deep role players. It wasn't going to end well. But I think this could be the death knell. I mean, if they can gut this one out and pick up a big win at Clemson, that'd be great. But at some point, I think you have to have the pieces to play the game. You can't win a chess game without any pieces. And it's like with George and now Pack, questionable. I don't know if they'll go or if they did suit up. I think that game already tipped, but I don't know. Those are the ones that just catch my eye, because it could be the end, like the beginning, like really the beginning of the end for this team, who I think I've been trying to hold out hope for the last couple of weeks.
Right. All right. So we're going to close out the notebook by talking about bracketology, similar to what we did last week. And I did the very similar to what I've been doing. I guess I've become an unofficial bracketologist. The one thing I did this week, it was different. I kind of put the conference favored in a different color. I now have 3 different colors, gray. So for example, in Conference USA, I'm projecting Louisiana Tech to win that conference, but if they don't win it, they're not in. So that distinguishes those teams. But similar to last week, we have 20 teams with auto bids that are one conference bid type of teams, like Louisiana Tech. And then we have 37 teams that are auto bids that would appear to be safe even if they don't win their conference tournament. So that gives us a total of 57. And we have 25 bubble teams that are fighting for those 11 remaining spots. So looking this over, do you have any observations about what we got going on here?
No, I mean, I think kind of similar to what we talked about last week. I think everything looks pretty solid. I don't have any major complaints. Again, I think the Mountain West is the most interesting conference to me, just in terms of like the discourse around them and the way people are talking about this is a 6 bid type of, they're going to get 6 in and Mountain West loaded. And it's not that they're bad. I just do think that like when you get to those, even the best mid-major conferences, like 6 bids is a lot. And the Mountain West is historically underperformed, most of the time being a first or second day kind of team. So I just think they're really interesting because, you have New Mexico, San Diego, Utah, Colorado, Nevada, Boise, like all those teams are good, have pretty solid wins over each other. But I think there is the question of like, how should a Mountain West team beating a Mountain West team be viewed compared to a Big 12 team beating a Big 12 team? I think that's kind of the discourse you have. But other than that, I think it looks pretty solid. I don't have any major complaints. I love to see my Zags still in yellow. Makes my heart happy.
Well, actually, they were in green last week, weren't they? No, or I guess
no, I think they were in yellow.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Um, so speaking of the Mountain West, there's probably I have also for each conference I have a projected minimum to get in and a maximum, and the Mountain
Right.
West has the widest range of any conference right now. I have 3
Mhm.
minimum, 6 maximum. I have New
Yeah.
Mexico winning, San Diego State, Utah State, Colorado State as in, Nevada and Boise State on the bubble, and Las Vegas is in white, meaning you're not in, but you have a chance to win the conference tournament, which I believe Vegas does. Um,
Hmm.
Interestingly, I debated whether to put Colorado State in yellow or green last night, and they got manhandled on the road by San Diego
Yeah.
State. So maybe they moved down to a bubble team. With Gonzaga, I was shocked when I looked at bracketology, and they're still saying they're not in. They're still saying they're like last or first 4 out or whatever after
Yeah.
winning at Kentucky. Um, I don't see that. The computers actually like them better at St. Mary's, who's won like 12 straight games, including
Yeah.
beating all the good teams in the West Coast. Um, I think Gonzaga should be in no matter what. Also, Grand Canyon, I have them winning the conference, but I'm not so sure that's a one bid conference to whack. I think there's a chance if somebody like Seattle or Tarleton State can
Yeah.
win the WAC tournament, the Grand Canyon still might have a chance to get in as an at
Hmm.
large. They're about the only team, mid-major that I see, and I thought maybe about James Madison, but I looked at their schedule and I just don't see it. Um, Trying to see what else has changed around here. Memphis still squarely on the bubble. Oh, I had Indiana State here at yellow, meaning they're in no matter if they win their tournament or not. But now they just lost to Illinois State at home.
Yeah.
So
Teams like that, teams that are like that much of a mid-major, that small of a program, you cannot have losses like that because the sad reality is those losses almost hurt you more than even like a big win would because it's like your competition level just is so far below what a lot of these other teams are facing night in and night out. Like I laugh because people talk so poorly about the WCC, but I'm like, imagine you put San Francisco in some of these conferences. You know what I mean? Like they would
yeah,
run the
yeah.
table year in and year out. They would be the perennial powerhouse in some of these conferences. So that does suck because it's like that loss, if they can't afford, they basically, in my opinion, have to finish the regular season out, no more losses, and then have to make a good run in their conference tournament. They take another bad loss.
Who are we talking about? USF?
Sorry, no, Indiana State still.
Oh,
I was just referencing the point of like
right.
people talk so poorly about like the WCC as a mid-major conference. I'm like, WCC compared to some of these other mid majors is far and away superior. But like Indiana State's gonna have to probably win out the rest of the regular season, and in my opinion, at least make a good run in their tournament because it's teams like that are so hard to where it's like you get in because of your win streak that like it's hard to ignore that. But the moment that snaps, and especially if it snaps to a team that is not good, it's like what do you do with them?
It's kind of clear to me though that they got in the top 25. They all
Yeah.
had it. They all had a huge party, and then they had to play a game the next the
No,
next day.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
and they blew it.
Huge. It was a huge. It was the perfect trap game setup for them.
Yeah,
You have a kind of your star player, and Robbie is like kind of this quirky looking. He kind of is that he fits that classic college basketball player build of he's like kind of a quirky looking guy, but on the court he's super productive and plays for a really small school that happens to be home of Larry Bird, who haven't been ranked since Larry Bird was there. Like perfect setup for them to be like front page news and then have a huge letdown game against an inferior opponent. Like that's the definition of a trap game.
yeah, yeah. And our SEC ACC watch, which we've been debating, I think now the ACC is clearly going to get at least 4 teams in. That would be
Yeah.
Carolina, Duke, Virginia, Clemson. I think Wake Forest and Pitt are the best other options to get in right now. Though all these teams are going to be playing each other, and Wake Forest needs a quality win for sure. Pittsburgh just got one. You know, they've already beaten Duke, and now they just beat Virginia. So it's looking pretty good for them. In the SEC, I have 7 teams in, 2 on the bubble. The in teams would be Bama, Auburn, Tennessee, Kentucky, Florida, A&M, South Carolina, with Mississippi State and Mississippi on the bubble. Mississippi still hasn't really gotten a good win yet. So yeah, they're starting. I thought they were definitely in a couple weeks ago. Now it's not looking. They still can't seem to beat a good team. So, all right. So we'll move on to the stock report, and it was hard to pick the hot guys because there seems to be a lot of hot guys out there. We could have probably had twice as many as we do on this list, but we're going to start off with the front runner, last year's player of the year, and now this year's front runner for player of the year. And that is Zach Edey. And you might be like, why are we talking about Zach Edey being hot? Well, I think the thing of it is if you looked in the preseason, like the draft boards, Edey usually wasn't anywhere to be found, or if he was, it was really late, you know, like maybe, I don't know, like maybe 60th or something. Now people are starting to, you know, warm up to him and have him pretty solidly on the draft board. The last time I looked, I'm just looking up the numbers. They have Edey at collective rankings, have him at 23. Now, I think that's a little high. I think you're probably looking end of first round, beginning of second round. But the interesting thing, I think the reason what had me put Edey on here was the fact that he sunk his first 3 of his college career on Saturday night against Indiana. And if you look at his last, and I'm going to go back, if you look at his last 9 games, okay, he scored at least 15 in each. And in those 9 games, he has 4 30-point efforts, 30 or more. Over that same span, he has at least 7 rebounds in every game. And in fact, all but one, he has at least 10 rebounds. The one exception was he did have a great game against Nebraska back on January 9th. Also pretty much a lock to get 1 or 2 blocks per game. So I know you've said multiple times you're not a Zach Edey fan. I guess my question is, are you buying him as a draft prospect? Do you consider him a first round prospect? Do you consider him a second round prospect?
I not first round to me. I know it's a weak class. We talked about it kind of for a while now. It's not the greatest draft class coming in. But I still don't think Zach Edey's a first rounder. I can concede that, you know, I think he should be on draft boards because when you're this productive, just from a raw statistical standpoint, it's almost worth the dart throw to see if, hey, can you find yourself, like, if Boban Marjanovic can stick around the league for just kind of being a big dude who's kind of got a fun personality, Zach Edey more than can do the same. And Zach Edey's better than Boban. That's not what I'm trying to say. But like, Zach Edey can stick. But, you know, every time I watch him play, there's just an element to me of where I'm like, yeah, okay, but like, yeah, you're 7'4", you turn around dunking on a 6'8" guy. Like, you shoot 11 you average 23 a game, but you shoot 11 free throws a game. And you shoot them at an okay clip. You know, 71% from your center is not horrendous, but are you going to shoot 11?
Actually, for centers,
yeah, exactly. Like, are you going to shoot 11 free throws a game? And I know that his role in the pros would change. No one's going to grab Zach Edey to be the focal point of their team, how Purdue has it. So, I mean, I think I buy him as, you know, probably to me, it'd be like kind of in the mid-second. Like, I could see him in like the 40s range because the raw production is there. It's been there for 2 years now. But I do think you kind of get a glimpse of the problems he's going to have when you look at their tournament failures with him being there the last 3 years or 2 years. We'll see how this year goes out. But the way you can beat a Zach Edey-led team is you space the floor, you kind of speed the game up. You just kind of play you just kind of play hard and gritty. And I'm like, in the NBA, all they want to do is space the floor, play super fast, run pick and rolls, and attack mismatches. And I'm like, that's not what Zach Edey does well. Zach Edey does a really good job of just kind of parking his ass down in the paint, making himself available for post-entry passes that no one else can grab because he's 7'4", and on defense, blocking shots that no one else can because he's 7'4". That's not going to work in the NBA, at least to this level. So, I mean, you got to have him in the draft. In my opinion, it's a weak class and his production's too good. I'm selling first round. I'll buy because I'm not an Edey guy. I'll buy him in that maybe 40 to 50-ish range because I think there's enough history of like kind of big men just making NBA rosters because of their size. And I do think Edey does have, again, he's a solid free throw shooter. He's not a bad passer. You know, he's not great, but he'll make a couple of nice reads. He's not a liability at the free throw line. But, you know, everyone like the Edey discourse, you know, is doing this. If they lose in March, it's going to do this. And I think the reality of it is it's somewhere kind of in the middle. Great college basketball player, an iconic college basketball player the last couple of years, but I don't see a first rounder because everything he does doesn't fit what the NBA wants to do. And his weaknesses are going to be amplified twice-fold in the NBA.
Right now on our draft board, he's at 28. So that would put him in the first round. But, you know, that he's right on the edge there between first and second round for me. And that's where I'd be buying. I'm terribly concerned about his foot speed. He's always going to be a drop coverage guy. And unlike, you know, a lot of college guards just can't take advantage of that drop coverage. You know, you need a good pull-up shooter or at least, yeah, you know, I think with drop coverage, you know, it's a tricky thing for a big. You know, the big the first thing he has to do is make sure he stops the guard, you know, and then he can release and go back to the big. And what allows, you know, you to get away with that more in college is the fact that the guards, once the big releases, they don't just sit there and pop and knock down a 15-footer. Now, 15-footers are not the most ideal shot in basketball. You know, you either want a 3-footer or a 23-footer. You know, open shot, you know. So, yeah, but I think foot speed is going to be key, and I just don't think he has it. You know, he's big and strong, and I think he could even get stronger. His frame,
for sure.
I think he could even have more muscle, but I just don't know what good that's going to do him in the NBA. So,
like, what would he? You know, because he's obviously a center. He's obviously a center, and I'm not saying he's going to be some starting center, but like, what the hell is he going to do with a guy like the Joker who can just pull away from the basket and be like, now what are you going to do? Or a guy like Embiid who can match him size for size, strength for strength. It's like that's just where I worry. Could he come in and give you a couple minutes, you know, off the bench and maybe, you know, be a kind of a mismatch? He almost strikes me as kind of like the type of guy who you throw in to throw the other guy off for a second. Go, oh crap, Edey's in. How do I counter that? Hold on, there's a 7'4" guy. Okay, we got it. We're good. And Edey comes back out. He's not the type of guy to me that you're going to start or even have like as a heavy rotation piece. He just strikes me more as a guy who's going to be kind of, you put him in for a few and you're like, oh, okay, we got to adapt now. This is he changes the dynamic of the game, both ends of the court for different reasons. I don't see him as a guy who's going to get super, super regular rotation minutes. I mean, he could, you know, maybe be a backup center, but I don't know. I don't really see it. And I'm like, I've seen so many great bigs. You know, Oscar Tshiebwe, Drew Timme, Trayce Jackson-Davis is still fighting to get into the rotation with the Warriors. Like, he hasn't solidified his place. And those guys, you know, kind of fit the bill more of like more agile, more mobile, maybe a little bit more reliable in the mid-range in some instances, you know, with Timme. And those guys aren't getting shots and making it. I'm like, I don't know.
Well, the one thing with Edey, though, I think no matter what level he plays, he's going to be hard to stop around the basket.
Of course. Of course. I mean,
Um,
you see it with so many other bigs, like guys like even like JaVale McGee and DeAndre Jordan, like different types of players, obviously. But like when you have size, you have strength, and you have kind of a unique athletic edge. Those guys, it was more their leaping ability. Edey, it's more of his strength and his like length. They're gonna find ways to put the ball in the bucket, but he's not gonna go into the NBA and go be 25 and 15 a night, Zach Edey. It's just not gonna happen.
yeah, I question. I think what's going to prevent him is defense because he's not even an elite shot blocker.
Yeah.
Then again, I don't know how much he gets tested at this level. I mean, I think he just alters everybody's
Right.
agenda. You know,
Absolutely.
we're not even gonna bother to try to score, you know, on the inside on him.
He did it to Graham Ike is the most throwback post player. When they matched up earlier in the year, Ike was taking threes. He made a few of them, but like that, he completely distorts teams at this level, without a doubt.
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna move on. I think we have a run of bigs here. The other next guy is Ryan Kalkbrenner, who last time I looked is getting very little love
Kid,
from the draft boards. Let me look where Ryan is last. Now, again, this is I don't do these surveys like every week, so this is probably about a month old. Last time I looked, he was 78th in the composite rankings. That means not in draft range. We have him much higher on our draft board. We have him 42. I have my reasons, but I'd like to hear what you think about Kalkbrenner. I think there are certain things that he does that Edey can't and may never do. But Kalkbrenner, actually, I should say this, has been on a tear of late.
Yeah.
In the last 7 games, he scored at least 16 in each. And he's also bringing down in those same games, he's brought down. Well, actually, he's actually had a couple stinkers in terms of rebounding.
He's been a monster defending the rim those last couple of games.
Yeah. And he had 7 blocks against Providence. He had 28 points against Xavier. He had 9 or more rebounds against Butler, DePaul, and Xavier. Also had 28 against Seton Hall not too long ago. Yeah. So what do you think of Kalkbrenner, especially, you know, it's kind of funny, you know, you have Edey, you know, up there now significantly, you know, in first round range on draft boards, and yet Ryan Kalkbrenner is really sometimes doesn't show up on draft boards.
I like Kalkbrenner a lot. You know, I'm sitting here thinking, I can't concretely say because I'd have to like actually take a look at all of them, but he might be my favorite center in the country. I can't concretely say that, but I'll put this: he's definitely top 3 for me. I just think that he does and impacts the game, particularly on the defensive end. You know, his stats look nice: 17 points, 7.5 boards. You'd like that to probably be a little bit higher, especially because he's like really the true center on that. He's the true big on that team. But I just think that when you hear so often in basketball, like, oh, he alters shots at the rims, he does the small things. You know, Kalkbrenner to me is a much better defensive player than Edey is because he actually plays defense. He's not just relying, and that's again harsh on Edey, but like Edey to a degree kind of just relies on, I'm big, I'm going to put my arms up, and then I'm going to be able to get the rebound before you even have a chance to jump up and grab it. Whereas I see Kalkbrenner, I see him rotate, I see him like legitimately defend the rim at a high level against great competition. I think he moves really well for a big guy.
Yeah. That's where I see the big difference is the movement. He
moves really well. He's kind of on the leaner side, but I still think he has strength. You know, his frame's definitely a bit leaner, but not like a Chet Holmgren lean. He still has a nice build to him. I just really like Kalkbrenner. I just think he does kind of all the things you want. Like when you look at players like this, for him to make a mark in the league, it's going to come on the defensive side because, you know, if you're a 7-footer for the most part in the NBA, that you're not getting post touches. He's not a great shooter. He's taken some threes this year. He hasn't been super successful, but he's definitely taken some threes. He's also, I think he's close to like 70% from the free throw line, so he's not a massive liability. He's under, but I think he's close.
Oh, for his career, he's 72%.
Okay, yeah, and I think this year he's
Yeah,
right around like
he's a little
70.
lower. Yeah, a little lower.
Okay, but like I
But
see,
last year he almost shot 80% from the free throw line.
yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I just like what I see from him on the defensive side because that's how guys like this get into the league is being shot blockers, shot alterators. Again, I'd like to see more rebounding. He does have some big rebounding games. His numbers are he hasn't rebounded well his last couple games, but like I just think that when I look at what I'd want to take in a 7-footer, Kalkbrenner checks a lot of the boxes. Like as from a basketball skill standpoint, that flat out I don't think Edey does. I think Edey again is able to get by more on the physical advantages. Where I see Kalkbrenner, yeah, he's still 7-1, but I see him move, rotate, better timing as a shot blocker, able to score around the rim pretty efficiently, a good free throw shooter. Yeah, I really like Ryan Kalkbrenner. Like I
Effective
said,
in the pick and roll where Edey is,
yeah,
but Edey's also slow about it.
exactly. Like
Kalkbrenner Kalkbrenner isn't the fastest guy, but I just think he's a much better guy on the roll.
100%. The reality is with Edey is even no matter any situation with Edey can automatically default to a high low. That's the thing with him. He can set the pick, roll kind of slow, but at the end of the day, you just throw the ball up, and odds are he's going to be able to get to it. So any kind of Edey action, whether he sets the screen and makes no contact with the guy, whether he slips it, whether he rolls early, late, whatever it is, you can always default. Where I feel like Kalkbrenner just has a better feel. And what I like is he is still putting up these numbers on a team that has Bailey Shireman, Trey Alexander, Stephen Ashworth, and he's still putting up his numbers, but he's also able to play with a more ball dominant scorer in Shireman, with a more kind of versatile, do everything guard, wing like Trey Alexander. Like that to me is what I really like to see. Like he's not the focal point per se on the offensive end, but still gets his numbers. And defensively, like I said, I'd have to look, but if he's not my favorite center in the country, he's number 2 or 3 at the worst, and I'm probably pretty confident saying he might be my favorite.
Yeah, yeah, definitely underappreciated.
Oh, without a doubt.
Even in the Big East.
Yeah,
kind of surprising. All right, so we're going to stick with bigs, and now we're going to talk about Johni Broome, who had been on a tear. Didn't have a bad game when they got blown out by Florida, but certainly not his best game. But he has been putting up really nice numbers, scoring pretty much at least 15, every game for, I don't know, most of the season. I think he hit a slow point just before Christmas, but since Christmas, he's really been steady. This is another guy he's going to get you, like, at least at Auburn is kind of good for like 15 and 8 every night. He too can shoot like Kalkbrenner can shoot a little bit from outside. This season he's hitting 34% on 2 attempts per game. That's pretty nice. One thing he's never been able to do is shoot fouls. 61% for his career and 61 this year. That's one thing I don't like. But he's averaging 16 points per game and 8.6 rebounds per game. Also a very good shot blocker at 2.4. Now we had the other thing about Johni is you have to consider last year he was invited to the G League Elite Camp, and he was one of the few guys that got invited to the NBA Combine. And I thought he played pretty well. And most people, the prevailing story around that is that he was told that he would have been a second-round pick, and he decided to come back to try to get that to a first-round pick. I don't know if he's made the strides this year to move into the first round, but I certainly would consider him a second-round option.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add. I'd say we kind of been on a streak of 3 straight bigs who've all been really productive in college. 3 straight bigs who I think are all second-round picks, and I think Broome's a second-round pick. I think he's been really productive. I don't see massive strides from where he was at last year. I think that's the only thing for me is like whether you want to look at it from actually watching the games to even just looking at his box score. He's been relatively kind of steady. Now the 3-point shot is nice. Like it's not elite, but like he's taking them, which he never really did, and he's making them enough to go. You have to at least think about hedging or not hedging, stunting towards it and like, making a play on it. The free throws are really, really bad. Like that's really bad. They've been bad. But do I think he's improved his stock? Probably not really. I mean, he might. I think he'll benefit on just it being a weaker class. Like there's more room for him to maybe jump up because people might be like, I don't really love that many guys in that middle of the second round area. Like, or they don't. No one really stands out. But I definitely would, buy second round pick. But he did not do enough and has not improved enough to jump into the first round.
Right. And that's, I consider him a borderline second round pick. One thing that surprises me is even less than Kalkbrenner, he's showing up like collective ranking 118. And I don't get that for a guy who got invited to the combine last year and at least has held his, I'd say if anything, he's improved his stock based on exactly what you said, shooting threes, at a fairly regular clip and making them at a decent clip. So yeah, I don't quite know what other people are thinking, but we know bigs get, they really have to, I don't know.
Yeah,
people automatically just ignore them.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't shoot high 30s from three as a big, it almost seems like nothing else you do. If you don't shoot like 38+% and block 2 shots a game, it doesn't seem like anything else you do matters. You could be a great passer, you could be an outstanding finisher, a great rebounder, but if you're not like that rim protector hybrid, like protect the rim and also shoot threes, like that Jaren Jackson archetype, doesn't matter what else you do. If you can't shoot 38% from three and block 2.5 shots a game in college or wherever you're coming from, which I think is a shame.
Well, I mean, what about Cliff Amore of Rutgers? I mean, that guy averages like 3.5 blocks per game. He's he's athletic, as he's more athletic than any of these bigs, and he actually gets even less respect on draft boards. Now, to me, that's transferable. What Cliff Amore can do,
100%. I 100%. I think all three of these guys do things, and again, even though I'm not that have value. But, again, the NBA is kind of a unique, almost variation of basketball where it's such a big emphasis on very specific things like shooting and like rim protection. Not defense, but like rim protection. It's not, those are different things. Like it's part of, they're part of each other, but defense, like you said, can a big play and drop coverage? Can a big jump out on the perimeter when he's switched on? Can a big, be a great rebounder to, put that final stamp on possessions? That stuff doesn't really get analyzed. They want, can you block shots or contest shots at the rim? And then on the other end, can you trail and hit a trailing three? If you can do that, you're going to fly up boards. If you can't, but you do everything else really well, you're kind of you're just a bit of an afterthought. At least that's the way I feel how it is.
Right. All right. So the next guy we're going to talk about is a guard. I thought he was pretty impressive in the Gonzaga game. Didn't have a super night last night against Mississippi, but again, another solid game. And that's Reed Sheppard. And this guy is just a stat sheet stuffer. I mean, I don't know if I've seen a freshman just like impact the game in so many different ways like he can. I mean, he can run the offense. He can shoot threes. He can play off the ball. He can score inside. He can score outside. He blocks shots. He makes steals. He gets, he regularly produces 3, 4, 5, 6 assists a game. So yeah, I'm sure you got a good look at Sheppard on Saturday against Gonzaga. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've seen him play a couple of times. I saw him very early in the year when they lost to Kansas and what was a good game. I saw him when they blew up Miami. I saw them when they played UNC. I saw them when they lost to Tennessee recently. And then obviously he's like the simplest way to put it. He's a basketball player. Like when I watch him play, it's very clear to me he understands the game. He understands like pace of play and, what should I be doing in this situation versus this situation? Like he's always kind of in the right place at the right time and then capitalizes on those moments. He had a couple of huge and ones against Gonzaga, knowing like, hey, I have the mismatch. I'm going to attack now. He didn't hit any threes, but I know he can. He's a good shooter. So
52%.
Yeah, so like he's a good shooter.
52%.
So he didn't make any against us, like thank God. But like he just understands the game. He's such a, in my opinion, really high IQ basketball for a freshman. He's not a super athlete, but he's crafty, both on defense and on offense. Like he's
Not a
had
bad athlete.
no, not a bad, but like he's not like you can tell like when there's some, especially young guys who are kind of getting by on, oh, this guy's got like a 40-inch vertical, or he's super like he's not a bad athlete, but he's not reliant on that. Like he's coming away with great steals. Like you said, he'll block a shot out of nowhere, and you'll be like, oh, where did that come from? And
He's almost
I really
a
like
6'3" guard who's almost averaging a block per game.
Yeah, I really like Reed. I think coming in, I wasn't really familiar. Obviously, that class, you had DJ Wagner coming in, you had Bradshaw coming, like, so he wasn't the highest touted one, probably to the general public. I mean, I'm sure in Kentucky, because he's a Kentucky kid, his dad played there, he was probably more known in that community. But he's been awesome. I have no issues. I just think that the kid's a hell of a basketball player, and that's something where I feel like we don't talk about enough. Is like, hey, yeah, okay, some guys are really great athletes, some guys are really great shooters, but like Reed is a really good basketball player. Like in the games I've watched, and again, I've like watched him play against some of the best teams in the country. We're talking Kansas, Miami, UNC, Tennessee, Gonzaga. And every single game, I feel like he's, even when he hasn't been like, oh yeah, I scored 20 points, I've been like, played a good game. Like he played a good game.
Yeah,
against Miami, he was really
he's
good.
not really putting the points up, but every night, But in that Gonzaga game, for example, he was asked to run the offense while Wagner and Dillingham were sitting on the bench.
Well, he did the same thing against Miami
because Kentucky was struggling on defense, and so he was the one guy of the three highly touted guards, he was the one guy Calipari trusts to actually run the offense, not turn the ball over, and play some D.
No, the game before the Zags that really caught for that was the Miami game. Scored 21, had 4 assists, 1 turnover. I think he had like 3 steals. And he did that against that guard rotation, which on paper might be one of the top 2 or 3 like guard kind of perimeter rotations on paper. And he was dominant. Like freaking that was the game that made me like, I heard about him from the Kansas game because everyone was talking about him because he got off to such a great start. But that Miami game, I was like, dude, this kid can play. He hit 5 threes, 3 steals, 4 assists, 1 turnover, scored 21 matching up with those guys. I was like, dude, this dude's legit. Really like Reed.
I've been in love with him since I saw him first play in a Kentucky uniform. I don't know who that was, probably that Kansas game. But yeah. And for those, his shooting splits, 53 from the floor, 52 from 3, 81 from the free throw line, chipping in 4.3 rebounds, 4.2 assists, 2.5 steals, and as I said, nearly a block per game, 0.83. You buying as a lottery pick?
Yeah, I think in a weak class, his production, his ability to do so many different, his ability to be a 1 or a 2, and I think that, I'm buying it.
How would you like, when I think of him, I think of Tyler Hero and a better defender.
Oh, it's funny. I was just thinking, I'm like, this kid's Tyler Hero on steroids. Because Hero was very much so like the one, like he was a 2 guard through and through. Reed is the exact opposite. Reed is a like combo guard, like literally combo guard through and through.
Yeah, the games Hero at the college level played a ton off the ball.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was a scorer, a shot taker, a shot maker. Play him off the ball, run him off. Staggered screens, get him in rhythm. Whereas Reed, you can do that for him and kind of let him play off the ball, and he's shooting 50+% from 3 on legit volume. You have to be aware of him. But then you can put the ball in his hands and go, hey, okay, I'm going to set the table for Trey Mitchell or Antonio Reeves or Brad. Reed is legit, man. He is legit. I'm buying him as a lottery pick. The concerns would be, again, he's not like an elite athlete, but I think he's an elite basketball player.
Right.
And that to me is more important at the end of the day. Luka Doncic and Nikola Jokic are tearing the league up. And I'm not saying he's going to be Luka Doncic. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying those guys are tearing the league up, and those dudes are not elite athletes in terms of the explosive pop speed and stuff.
Yeah, so, most definitely. All right. So we just had our Reed Sheppard love fest. Drew and I both love him. And we're going to finish off the Who's Hot with another SEC guard. We had 3 SEC players on here this week, and that's Wade Taylor from Texas A&M. And Wade is just en fuego. Of course, he's the main thrust of that Texas A&M, offense that's kind of starved for scoring. But going all the way back to mid-January, put up 31 against Kentucky, 41 against Arkansas, 30 against Ole Miss, 25 against Tennessee this weekend, and then last night put up 18 in that surprising loss to Vanderbilt. Taylor grabs you some rebounds, even though he's only 6 feet tall. He's a score for, at least in this case, he's a score first point guard for A&M, but he'll still, have his games. He usually at least gets like 3 assists a game, but like, for example, against Tennessee, he had 7. He's good for a steal or 2. The downside to Wade Taylor is obviously 6 foot. That's a starting point, but is his shooting. He's even less efficient than he was last year. This year he's only shooting 37% from the field, 31% from deep, though he gets to the free throw line a lot. He gets there almost 6 times a game, and he's a great free throw shooter at 84% this year and for his career. He's only a junior, by the way. So yeah, what do you think of the dynamic little scoring guard for Texas A&M?
You kind of hit on it, Rich. Like you look at the raw stats, and you're like almost 20 a night, almost 4 boards, 4 assists a game. You're like, that looks really good from a 6-foot guard. But you kind of pull back the curtain. I don't know. I'm just not, to be that size and to be that inefficient kind of bothers me. He also turns the ball over almost 3 times a game. So, I mean, he does give you almost 4 assists, but he's also coughing it up a lot per average. So, I mean, I think Wade Taylor is exactly what the team needs, because they need a jolt offensively, and he's not afraid to take shots, and he'll make some. But, like, I remember I watched them in that was it the Kentucky game he scored 41?
Yeah.
No, Kentucky.
No, he scored 30
Arkansas.
30 against Kentucky, 41 against Arkansas the next.
Right. So I watched him in that Kentucky game, and it's like, yeah, he scored 31. He shot 29% from the floor. Like, he took 24 shots to get 31 points. And he shot really good from 3. He hit 6 threes in that game. So, like, that kind of was the saving grace. Like, that balanced it out. Like, he shot really good from 3, but really bad from the field. So, the thing with Taylor is, like, he would probably be better suited, if you're looking at pro prospects, to be a type of guy that could come in, maybe run a second unit, and not be relied to be the generator of offense. Because the problem is they're asking him to, be that scorer. And at 6 foot tall, it's not conducive to him being efficient. Like, he'd be better off as a guy who can come in, run some offense, and maybe be like the 3rd scoring option, where he can kind of more strategically pick his spots, still get to the line, you know what I mean, with the ball in his hand, but not have to sit there and settle for some of the shots. He settles for some shots. I'm like, that's just not a good shot. And it's really not a good shot for a 6-foot guard. So, I mean, I don't know. I'll be honest. This is, if I was just doing general buy and sell, not even knowing where he's at on our board, it probably would be more of a sell. Obviously, I think he comes back next year, and hopefully maybe they can get him some help on the offensive side.
That's what he needs. Yeah, some help, because this team is starving for offense.
Yeah. So every time I've seen A&M play a few times, and it's like, you defensively, you're like, okay, cool. And again, he'll make some plays, he'll hit some shots, but when you peel it back, it's almost kind of like, to me, it's a little bit, his production offensively is a bit of fool's gold, because it's coming on such poor efficiency. He turns the ball over.
A lot of it comes from the free throw line.
And a lot, exactly.
And he's a fearless driver, and he doesn't mind contact, and he loves contact, and I love that about him. Yeah. But at the same time, you just can't. This efficiency is just.
No, I agree. So it would be a sell for me. with the hope that maybe he comes back, they continue to build the team around him, and he could showcase more of his strengths instead of being kind of forced into a role that physically, and I think, and I do think from a skill standpoint, he's not really built to handle. He'd be, in my opinion, in the perfect role. He's a third scoring option, at least maybe the second.
Right. By the way, collective rankings, he was 81. He's 90th on our draft board right now.
Yeah.
So, I'm kind of, I love his game. I love his fearlessness. And I'd love to see him play with some help, where he could actually drive and kick once in a while. But right now I think I'm sailing as an NBA player. And you guys, when we were talking about Tremont Mark last week, you and Caleb used the phrase dime a dozen. Now, I kind of disagree with that. I don't think you find wings like Tremont, 6'6" wings like Tremont Mark, who can create off the bounce. I wouldn't call those guys a dime a dozen, but I would call guys that are between 5'10" and 6'2" at the college level who can give you 20 points a night, like Wade Taylor, a dime a dozen. They are a dime a dozen. And I think, I told you, last week when I looked at the heights in the NBA, once you get around 6 foot, your chances of making the NBA are really slim. And if you're under 6 foot, forget it. There's like 2 players out of 500 and some that are under 6 foot. Okay. So, and Taylor's right on that line. If he was a more efficient shooter, especially from deep, if he was, a more efficient playmaker, then yes, I might be buying. But right now he's not. And I think this is where the phrase a dime a dozen comes to my mind, is when I'm looking at a 6 foot guard putting up 20 points a night, in D1. So there we go. All right, so we'll move on to who's cold. And some of these guys you might say, oh, before we move on, I just, we've had a slew of guys that we've been trying to get on here, and they've been hot. Now, some of these guys are newcomers, but I just want to read off the guys that we didn't get a chance to talk about this week, but are really, really playing well. And Texas forward Dylan Dessou, JJ Starling, he's been on a scoring tear for Syracuse. Maxi Renaud, for Stanford, has put up like 20 some points, like 4 out of the last 5 games. Went 11 to 12 from the field against USC. Of course,
if Cannon Carlisle plays in that matchup against Arizona, they might win that game because Renaud was dominant. He had like 26 and 11 or something like that.
Arizona's having trouble stopping bigs.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, because they have 2 7-footers, but they are. All right, some other guys. Colorado State's Nick Clifford, who was former Colorado player. He's been outstanding this year. Donovan Dent, the sophomore, Donovan Dent, the sophomore point guard for New Mexico. Igor Milicic, who we're working on getting on the show. He's a 6'10" guy who can knock down threes. I mean, he's got a beautiful shot. Desmond Claude from Xavier, and Enrique Freeman, player of the year, leading candidate to be player of the year in the MAC. I also believe he leads the nation in double-doubles. They were all candidates to make our Who's Hot list. Hopefully we'll get time to talk about those guys in the coming weeks. So we'll move on to who's cold. And only got 3 guys. And some of these guys, they were almost have built-in excuses, I think. And we'll talk about somebody we already mentioned earlier in the season, and that's Boogie Ellis. Boogie Ellis hasn't really had a good game, I'd say, since maybe, I don't know, January 10th against Washington State. Not even that. I would probably go all the way back to January 6th against Stanford, because Boogie, in his last 6 games, 3 for 11, 3 for 9, 2 of 7, 5 of 16, 3 of 10, 5 of 13, 8 of 14. Now, some of those games he's put up big, decent points like 17, 18, 22. But as you can see, he's shooting, high volume and not converting at a high rate. So on the season, I'm sure Boogie's numbers, he had a really nice year last year. He's at 43% from the floor, and he's actually shooting better from deep. I'm surprised, 42%.
Yeah.
From the free throw line, 76. So all those numbers are good, but lately his efficiency has been off. And so what do you make of Boogie? I mean, his overall point production is a little lower than last year. Last year he was close to 18 points a game. This year he's down to 16.
I don't know, man. I've never been the biggest Boogie Ellis guy. I mean, this is year 5 of, Boogie Ellis. I know he spent those first 2 at Memphis, and then now he's been obviously at USC the last couple of years. Like, I think we kind of just know what he is. He's a 6'2", kind of scoring guard who can do a little bit of playmaking, who's, solidly efficient. But I just, again, I'm not overly that impressed. And I think, like, this is year 5 now, and you still haven't really, like, evolved your game, at least since I've been watching at USC the last 3 years, and you weren't really getting a lot of draft buzz the last couple of years, and now you're just a year older. I don't know. I'm not really. And then with all the trouble they're having this year, you would think like a 5th-year senior who does have a bit of a resume in terms of his production and stuff, and now the team's kind of imploding behind you. I don't know. I've never been a big Boogie Ellis guy. Nothing this year has changed that. In fact, if anything, it's kind of hurt because he's dropped production-wise. And like I said, all this shit's going on behind the scenes where it's like you would think a 5th-year senior would be able to kind of help maybe pull them through that. So I'm pretty indifferent to Boogie Ellis, to be honest. This team's not good. I don't think he does anything, and he's not the type of player to get them out of it. So, I mean, I guess if you take all that, it's kind of a sell, but I never was really high on him anyway. I never really was buying him anyway, so I don't really have anything to sell, if that makes sense.
Right. And the collective rankings had him way down there at 158.
Yeah.
We have him on our board at 75, and I'll tell you why. If you look over the last 4 years, say, there are 3 guards that kind of stand out to me that kind of always usually have a moment or two every game I watch them that make me go, woo. And, that's Caleb Love, RJ Davis, and Boogie Ellis.
Yeah.
And, in terms of shot creation and being, a combo guard, who can make plays for others, I do like that. I do love his shot creation and ability to, to put points on the board. All those guys are about the same size. I mean, Boogie Ellis, I think, is 6'3". I think Caleb Love might be 6'3", 6'4". And Davis, I think Davis is 6'2". Of the 3 right now, two of those guys are winning, and Ellis isn't. And so that's probably why I consider the other 2, late 2nd round picks, and I don't think Boogie's going to get drafted.
Yeah.
Does he have a chance? I think he does in terms of a score. I just think he's one of those guys that could put points on the board. Is it enough? He's falling in that dime a dozen category.
Yeah, I was leaning towards saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, he falls in that dime a dozen category. So, I guess I'm buying that he has a chance, and he's definitely in the top 100 of our draft board. So I'd like him better than most, because I don't know if you could say, well, I really love Caleb Love, but I hate Boogie Ellis. I just don't see where you can do that.
That's fair. Now, for what's worth, I was never the biggest Caleb Love. I'm not the biggest Caleb Love or RJ Davis guy.
Right.
Like, not for NBA. Collegiately, they're super fun to watch. They're great players. Any given night, they go for 30-something. But, yeah. I think that's a great way to, when we say dime a dozen, I think literally those are 3 players that you're like, if you did like a blindfold resume or just like watch highlights but took jerseys off of them, you'd be like, so that's the same guy? I think that's the same guy. It's not.
Right.
So, yeah.
I just think that one of the problems with this USC team is Boogie Ellis needs to play off a point guard who's a point guard. He can't be
Yes.
playing with a point guard that wants to score like Collier.
Well, they're like basically two shooting guards. Boogie can kind of play make, but he's a scorer. So you have
Right,
two scorers out there.
Right, but the difference is Collier likes to drive the ball.
Yeah.
Ellis likes to play on the perimeter,
Yeah.
but neither of them like to pass the ball that much. So, all right, so we're moving on. Next on our Who's Cold list is Wooga Poplar. And Wooga's been pretty high on draft boards this year. I'll tell you exactly where. Last survey I did had Wooga Poplar at 38 collectively. We've dropped him recently. We have him 49. So the collective was thinking early second round pick. We're thinking more late second round pick. What are your thoughts on Wooga? And by the way, Wooga hasn't really had a good game. I'd say going all the way back to Pittsburgh on January 27th. And then before that, he had two stinkers before that against Syracuse and Notre Dame. So he really was hot early in the season. But it seemed, I'd say around Christmas time is when let's say maybe the turn of the year is when things started going south.
Yeah, I mean, I think based on where you said, I mean, we have him. You said 49, and the collective has him at 38. I think that's still a relatively fair range. We'll just round it out and say 40 to 50 range. Round it, and I still think that's pretty fair. I mean, 6'5" wing, solid rebounder, can pass a little bit. I won't say he's a great playmaker, but I think he can do some secondary. He's not a ball sticker. He will pass. He does have pretty much a 1-to-1 turnover assist ratio, but he's a good 3-point shooter. He shoots well over 40% this year, if I'm not mistaken, on over 5 attempts a game. Still a good free throw shooter. Not a bad very much so. Kind of just strikes me as a guy who could very easily be a rotational kind of wing player. He's not going to go blow your socks off. And I think after last year, I saw some flashes. I thought, hey, Wooga might be like the next guy. He might take some leaps. Now, I do think if he's in that mid-second round, I could see him coming back for a fourth year, and maybe then having one big year to try to boost himself into that like low first round. But I would buy in that 40 to 50 range because I still think he's got solid size, solid rebounder. He's a good shooter from three. He's gotten better. I mean,
good athlete,
doubled his volume, and got significantly better as a 3-point shooter. And again, I think this Miami team as a whole this year just hasn't looked right and hasn't really popped. We talked about it so many times, but they've been injured, and they've had games where they've looked really off, and then even games where they've competed and looked good, they've lost. And so I just think this Miami team kind of just a letdown year after what was a really, really strong season last year. So I would buy him in that 40 to 50 range, no problem. And I see him probably coming back maybe for a senior year to see if he can have one big senior year. Wong is now gone. Omir would be gone, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I think he has one. I think everybody on this Miami team can come
Except
back.
Pac, right?
No, I think Pac can come back too.
This has got to be Pac's fifth year. Didn't he do? I thought he did 3 at Kansas State, or do you only do 2?
I'm pretty sure he's just a senior.
Oh, well, either way.
Yeah, I think he only did 1 at Kansas State, but I'll tell you.
I thought he was there I thought he was there way longer.
No, okay, so he played 2 years at Kansas State, 2 years at Miami, so he's got 1 more year.
Okay. Yeah, I say come back, Wooga. This team is still I still believe in the raw talent on this team. And I think, as much as we've said, I think Wooga's had an okay year. He just hasn't had any kind of those big signature games. You look at guys who we have on the hot list, some of those guys have had like kind of signature games where they've had a streak of going for 24 plus, maybe 3 games in a row. They have, Wade Taylor's a 40 ball on his resume this year. Wooga hasn't done that, but you look at him and go, I still think there's enough there to find a rotational wing, and I think getting that kind of value in the 40 to 50 range, I'd have no problem. I would buy it.
I agree with everything you said. I'm buying in that range. And, it's funny, even though he hasn't played well in conference play, 44 from the field, 42 from deep, and over 5 threes a game. 84 from the free throw line, 5 rebounds a game, 2.2 assists. I think he needs to improve as a defender.
Yeah,
That's
fair.
This Miami team just doesn't defend like it did last year. And like that North Carolina game it was almost like defense was optional for both sides.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, Miami actually had a lot of threes that either he couldn't knock him down, or it seemed like Pack was the only guy who could make threes in that game for Miami. But the built-in excuse he has is not everything has worked well in Miami. I mean, he's just kind of been a disappointing year all around. But he too has been playing on a bum ankle, and I'm not sure.
True. He's been one of the guys that's been hurt. He
right.
has been one of the guys.
So he got hurt, and then he came back, and then I heard he wasn't 100%. So I don't know where he stands right now. But health has plagued just about every key player on this Miami team this year. So that's why I give him a pass. But yeah, I think if he could be a first-round pick if he came out and was an elite 3-and-D guy. Seems to have the offense down. Now it's a matter of the defense, in my opinion.
Totally.
All right, the last guy on Who's Cold is Justin Moore. And this is kind of a sad story, if you ask me.
Sure.
And another Villanova guy, on the team. But basically, Justin, he's really he hasn't scored more than 6 points going all the way back to January 20th. So his output in between now and January 20th, 4 points, 5 points, 6 points, 6 points, 3 points, 4 points. And he's just not doing it in any category, really. Yeah. And people are saying in the Philadelphia area he's just, because of injuries, he's just not the Justin Moore we're used to seeing. Now, this Villanova team is borderline dysfunctional too, if you ask me. You never know. You never know what you're going to get from. And his minutes have definitely been cut into, but I mean, probably with good reason. He's 37% from the floor, 25% from deep, and free throw line he's doing well, but he's shooting less than 2 free throws a game, so it doesn't really matter. He's shooting 89%, but all his numbers are like almost their career lows, really, in just about every category. You name it. So I don't know how much his health issues are playing into this versus the dysfunction at Villanova. But either way, he has an excuse, but that doesn't do his draft stock very well, because this is it for Justin Moore. And many people, before his Achilles injury, were talking about him as a legit draft prospect. And we've kept him on our top 200 all during that time up until recently. The numbers have just gotten so dismal, we can't keep him on there anymore. So your thoughts?
I mean, first off, this I remember early in this year, there was a 4-game stretch in like a 6-day period where this Villanova team handled Maryland, handled Texas Tech, beat North Carolina in overtime, but beat them, and handled Memphis. And I was like, man, yeah. And I was there like this, and they had that one loss to Penn that was close, but I was like, okay, maybe this is the Villanova team. They figured it out this year. Maybe that Neptune's figured it out. They brought in Burton as a transfer. More like all the guys are here, and boy was I wrong as hell. God, I was so wrong. But focusing more and more. I mean, I hate to say it, but this is almost an easy sell from the standpoint of I don't know how you buy a guy with an Achilles tear on his resume, who's on the older side. This is year 5. Has been in the same school, so in theory should be relatively comfortable with teammates. I mean, I know the coaching change is not. It's been very obvious that Jay Wright is no longer on the sideline. But like, I don't know how to me, I'm looking at hearing the numbers you're putting out. I'm like, I can't buy that. I can't. Like I could buy Wooga Poplar, because I'm like, okay, he's still shooting 40, 44, 42, 83. We know, I can still buy things.
And he's still like 20, 21 years old.
Yeah. I could buy Boogie Ellis because, like you said, and he's still giving you 18, 3 boards, 3 assists. We know he's a dynamic scorer. I can buy that. I'm like,
we haven't seen Justin Moore take over a game in God knows when.
Since he got hurt. Probably. I mean, the last time he was probably really like, oh, that's a guy that I see in the league was probably in that tournament run, and then he blew his Achilles. And so this isn't easy. It's a sad sell, but it's an easy sell because I almost feel like it'd be a disservice to me trying to start my basketball career. I feel like if I went out there on a limb and said, yeah, this is a buy. I mean, if you want to try to make the argument that this is like the lowest buy you could get because maybe he just needs to get out of Neptune's system and but I'm like, he's 2 years off the injury now. So in theory, if he was going to he should be fully recovered from that. I mean, you never really recover from an Achilles, but like, I just, the excuses, there's some excuses there, but
he wasn't an elite athlete to begin with.
Exactly. It's not like, he had a 40-inch vertical.
He was more of a crafty, strong player, I mean, but he did have, I'd say for as Villanova players go, he was probably above average for a Villanova player.
Sure.
Where like Mikal Bridges was probably like off the charts for a Villanova player.
Absolutely.
But Diacono was probably like,
the more standard.
Yeah, the more standard Villanova player.
I mean, like Brunson's like, look at Brunson. Like those are the guys. No, I agree. Like I said, this is just a sad sell. But I think anything other than selling, it's like, okay, yeah, sure. If you want to, take it down in its most dissected form, I'm buying it as cheap as it gets. But I'm like, we haven't seen it for so long, and now it's getting really bad. And he's still getting minutes. Like, it's not like he's playing 10 minutes a game and scoring 4 points. He's playing 23, 24, 25 minutes a game. Like,
yeah, but that has dropped down from like 30 a game. I mean,
sure, but like, if you're a fifth-year player if you're a fifth-year player and you play 25 minutes in a game, you should probably do more than grab like 1 rebound and have 4 points.
Right. Yeah.
As a fifth-year player who was like been in the rotation, not like some, token fifth year, everybody loves you. Like, you are a guy that's been in this rotation, was a big part of this team. So
I think part of it is he never was a great athlete to begin with. Then he goes through all these injury problems, and he's playing for a coach who God knows what the game plan's going to be like from night to night, So yeah, I just think there's been no consistency there. I hope he gets with a professional team that is willing to cut him some slack and maybe look in. I'm not saying that Villanova hasn't done this, but I don't know. But I really think they have to look at, improving his explosiveness, and maybe I'm not saying the injury wasn't properly rehabbed, but if he could get with some kind of trainer that can help him regain some of that explosiveness, he has a chance to be, maybe a role player, maybe a role player in the NBA, but unlikely. He's more likely, headed to Europe or going to play in the G League. It's just. All right. So now we're going to move on to our picks of the week, and that wraps up our stock report, by the way. And last week, Drew was the champion. He was 19-11. He bumped his overall percentage up. He's right on my butt. I'm at 57.4. He's at 57.3. Caleb's at 56.4. Last week, Caleb went 16-12. Drew 19-11. I went 18-12. So I was close to Drew, but all right, Drew. So here we go. And this is my favorite game of the week on our slate. It's our first one.
God. I didn't even look at I didn't even look at this one. I haven't IUPUI, Indiana Purdue versus Detroit Mercy, who has yet to win a game this season. They're 0-26, but this is their chance. IUPUI is the second worst team in the conference. I'm going to pick. I'll make my pick right now. I say Detroit Mercy gets that win. They're going to be 1-26. I'm taking Detroit Mercy. No way these guys don't win a game all year, and this is the perfect opportunity for them to do it. Give me Detroit Mercy.
All right.
in what's going to be a barn burner somehow.
Caleb, by the way, did not put in his picks for the first time ever, so we can either gain some great distance on him or but anyway, no Caleb picks this week. All right, so we're both going with Mercy to be 1-26 after tonight. All right, now we have South Carolina at Auburn.
I'm going to take Auburn. I think at this point I have to concede that, like, I wasn't in Cam's. I think did Cam say they were going to be South Carolina going to be the worst team in the SEC? I don't think I was ever going to go that far, but I'm going to take Auburn at home. I think this Auburn team is another one of those situations where every time I picked against them, they proved me wrong. So I'm going to kind of buck that trend. But I also think it's a solid team and should be a really good game. I mean, it's basically 11-13. So
I'll
take the home. I'll take the home team.
South Carolina's 11, Auburn's 13. I like Auburn too. They were embarrassed at Florida. Florida really put it on them after Auburn had beaten Alabama.
Another trap game.
Another trap game, right?
Yeah.
I'm still not a big. I know we're trying to give our props to South Carolina, but I'm still not a big believer. All right, now we go on to two teams. I don't know if I want to call them bubble teams, but if they go on a run, they could be a bubble team, and that's in the Big Ten, Iowa at Maryland.
I'm gonna take Maryland. To be honest, I haven't seen Iowa play this year, I don't think, and if I have, I don't remember, so it wasn't the most memorable performance. I'll take Maryland. I'll go Jameer Young, friend of the show we interviewed last year, if I believe.
No. He canceled on his.
Oh, well, that's right, because I wrote the interview questions for it. That's right. Well, he was going to give us a shot, so I'm going to go with Jameer Young and the Maryland.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the home team here. I've seen both teams multiple times. Not impressed by either, but I think, if one of them goes on a run, they could be one of that fifth or sixth team that Big Ten gets in. There's a bunch of teams all in that mix. Penn State, Rutgers, fighting to be like the sixth team coming out of the Big Ten. All right, moving on to tomorrow's games. We have Stanford at Washington. Again, two teams fighting to get on the bubble.
My head says Washington. My heart says Stanford. You know what? Screw it. I'm gonna go Stanford. I don't have really strong convictions either way here, but maybe I just want to see these guys knock off Washington after Washington beat my Zags early in the year. Maybe that's what's pushing me. But I do think, I know early in the year we talked about Jared Haas, Stanford, what was wrong over on the farm, and I will give credit. I don't think they've fixed all those issues by any means, but they've been better. And I'm gonna go with Stanford. I think Stanford has some young guys who can go make a difference. The way Reno's playing, Ken Carlisle, as we predicted, has been kind of an X factor for them. So I'm gonna go with Stanford.
Yeah, I like Stanford. I think they definitely have more talent than Washington. Washington's also kind of hurting without Kepnang. He played big against your Zags, and he really hasn't played much since because of injury. That's the problem with Kepnang. Kepnang's actually, could be an NBA player if he could ever stay healthy.
Yeah.
But he can't. All right. So next, Thursday, also a Thursday game, Colorado against UCLA. And believe it or not, UCLA has worked their way up to the top of the conference. Colorado hasn't been playing so well. Cody Williams, who we repeatedly called Kobe Williams last week. Cody Williams is back for Colorado, but he hasn't really played well since he's returned. So I'm looking at this game as a toss-up.
I'm gonna take Colorado. I just think Colorado. UCLA's been better. Again, shout out to them for increasing their ranking and ability. So my Zags might be able to pick up a bit of a boost there. But I'm going to take Colorado. I still don't love this UCLA team. I think they're a year away from being a really solid team. I think Colorado has the best player in this game in De Silva. And if Williams rights the ship, they could have the two best players in this game. And
I think Colorado has the potential to be, clearly the second best team in the Pac-12, but they haven't been playing like it. UCLA, you got to give them some kudos from what looked to be a lost season to they're now playing solid ball. But yeah,
Absolutely.
you're right. They're a year, maybe 2 years away, but they will be dangerous if they keep this group together. I'm
Absolutely.
going with UCLA just because Colorado's just kind of hasn't really put it together yet.
Yeah.
All right, this game was on there for Dante. Toledo and Akron are really the two best teams in the MAC, and Ohio is the probably the third best team in the MAC. Toledo beat Ohio earlier this year at Ohio, and now here is the rematch.
I'm going to take Toledo. Part of this, being honest, I'm not the most familiar with Ohio. So I'll take Toledo at home because we called the Toledo game earlier, so I went back and watched it, and they look pretty good.
Yeah, they really good guard play. The problem they have is they don't have a big. They need a big. They don't have a big. But yeah, they have really nice guard play. Including our friend Dante Maddox. All right. The WAC conference, talk about cannibalization. They just been beating up on each other. And you know what's weird about I call them the WAC, Mountain West Conference. You know what's weird about the Mountain West is the home court advantage really hasn't been a big deal. So now we have New Mexico at San Diego State. Yeah, who you got?
I still think San Diego State should be the best team. Like, I feel like they should be the best team. I think the Aztecs, again, are a little bit of a Cinderella run last year. They lost Keyshawn Johnson this year. They lost Matt Bradley. They still have the pieces with, Jaden Ledee, Darion Trammell. I'm going to go with San Diego State.
I think the biggest loss from that San Diego club is Mensa, the shot blocker.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't the same stats sheet guy as the others.
Oh,
but
he protected the rim as good as anyone in the country.
Oh. Yeah, they're definitely not the same defense as you'd normally expect from San Diego State.
Right.
We're one of the best. I'm still going to take the Aztecs, if anything, because they're at home. But the Mountain West has absolutely cannibalized itself to a degree, which is part of the reason why I think the 6 bid Mountain West, on paper, it's alive, but I don't know if come the selection day they're going to actually put 6 in.
Right. I too like San Diego State. I think they're the hottest team in the Mountain West. They're at home, but I believe these are the 2 best teams in the conference.
Yes.
And this is a critical matchup, but you got to give San Diego State the edge at home. All right, moving on to Saturday, we have Texas A&M at number 15, Alabama.
I'm going to go Alabama. A&M's had some awesome wins this year. They beat Kentucky in an overtime game. They just beat Tennessee, but both times after those games, they had letdowns against inferior teams, lose to Vanderbilt, and they lost to Arkansas after that Kentucky game. So I know that they just lost to Vanderbilt. The logic would tell you, hey, they should get the win. But I do think Alabama is better. Alabama's playing at home. And I think A&M just hasn't been able to consistently put it all together this year. They'll have a great high followed by a bad low, or a couple great wins, and then also there'll be a bit of a losing streak tossed in there. Nothing major. I think they've been good, not great this year. I think Alabama's better, and Alabama's at home.
Alabama, to me, is definitely the better offensive team. I think A&M is probably the better defensive team. That's like fair. A&M. You know why I like A&M? Because they lost to Vanderbilt, and that's the way this season goes. That's the way the season goes. If you lose an unexpected game, then expect an unexpected game after that in the opposite direction. That's the way this season goes. It's crazy. I am going with A&M because they lost. All right, continuing with the Saturday slate, we have Wake Forest at number 21, Virginia, who just lost last night to Pittsburgh at home.
This one's hard. I like this Wake Forest team, and I think this Wake Forest team really needs this game.
They do.
I'm going to take Wake Forest because I think this is the type of I think they need this. They need this game for their resume. Virginia started off they were definitely talks about, is this Virginia basketball? What's going on here? They've definitely rallied. They had that nice little win streak. So I'm going to take Wake Forest. It was kind of a desperation game for them. But I could totally see Virginia pulling this one out.
Well, this is tough.
This is
I
tough.
like your logic. I'd like to see Wake Forest win so they could get into the tournament. It just seems like year after year they're always on the bubble and they can't just break through.
Yeah.
But I'll go with just to be different. I'll go with UVA. And they just lost. So using my just lost theory, they should be golden. Virginia should be golden to win. All right, now we have TCU at Kansas State.
I like this TCU team, man. I think the big, like, I know they're like sixth in the Big 12 or seventh or something like that, but that's because the Big 12 is so good.
Mm-hmm.
I like this team, man. Like, I think that, it's a super tough conference for a reason. I'm gonna take the Horned Frogs here. This one could bite me because I think the Big 12 is again everybody here is super competitive, but I'll take TCU. I like TCU, man. I think they've been solid this year. They don't really have any bad losses. All of them have been to like really good opponents for the most part. Um, all of them. Actually, I'm looking at it now. You could argue that their quote unquote worst loss was to Nevada, who has been pretty good this year. So give me TCU. They pick up a big road win.
I think TCU is slightly better team, or maybe
Yeah.
even a better team. But I'm going to go with K-State. We saw how tough it can be when Kansas went there to win. I believe this Kansas State team is hurting to get in the tournament. I just don't think they're going to make it. But if they are, they're going to have to win some games like this.
Absolutely.
All right. So now we have number 17 Creighton at Butler.
I've been pretty high on him. I spoke very glowingly about Kalkbrenner. Shireman just threw up the first triple double in program history, I believe. Um, give me Creighton. I think Creighton's just better. That Butler's been pretty good this year, but I think Creighton's just been better.
Yeah. Think Creighton's in the tournament. Butler's on that bubble.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Creighton on the road. I think they're that much better. All right. We got number 9 Duke at Florida State. Florida State continues to blow opportunities to get good wins. They're running out of chances.
I don't really, excuse me, like this Duke team, but I don't really like this Florida State team. I think Florida State they're another one of those teams where it's like on paper, they should be super athletic, just pressuring people, crushing people with length, speed, but they don't really do it. They've got some gnarly losses. I
Yeah,
think
they
Duke is
can't
just,
score.
yeah,
They have nobody to lead them in scoring.
I'm going to
We thought
take Duke.
that guy was going to be Baba Miller, and
Yeah,
he's definitely improved over last year, but he's just not the type of guy that's going to take over a game yet.
no, yeah. I'm gonna take Duke. I think Duke is. I don't think they are better. With all that being said, I don't think this Duke team has. And I saw somebody else say this, so I'm not gonna claim the point entirely as my own. But they don't have like that quote unquote dog in them. They do not strike me as a Duke team that kind of wants to get into the fight. They kind of want to just, well, we're better, roll over, let us win. Is the vibe I get from them.
Yeah,
And this Florida State team could exploit that because they are physical, they are big, they are strong and athletic, but Duke is better.
yeah. I just don't see this. It's tough. Florida State and Miami. You see this in California and Florida. It's probably the only 2 states where you see it regularly, where the fans just don't get into it. You know, and so the home court advantage just right there isn't really there right now for Florida State and Miami. Sometimes at their home games you could hear a pin drop. By the way, while we're on this, and as long as I'm making corrections from last week, we called Duke's Jared McCain, Jared McCants about 3 or 4 times. So it's Jared McCain. So sorry about that. I hate to screw up people's names, but sometimes we're trying to remember about 500 names per show. All right. So we got number 20, Wisconsin at Iowa.
I'm going to take Wisconsin. I know we were kind of critical of them, but this is kind of I don't want to say a must win because they did beat Ohio State, but the questions are now very clearly being raised. The red flags are kind of there now. So I think they need to counter that 4-game losing streak with a little bit of a winning streak here. I think they're better than Iowa. And so they got to go handle business and get back in the win column consistently and kind of regain form with the tournament right around the corner.
Yeah. For some reason, I actually, when I was doing the bracketology last night, I noticed, and as I said, as far as I know, sports reference formulas is very similar to KenPom's. I haven't compared them recently, but I'll tell you, you know what these computers are doing, at least sports reference computer? They give you a lot of credit for losing to good teams close.
Yes, a lot.
And that's too much credit. They give too much credit for losing to good teams, close games. And also the thing I'm noticing about these computers is they're giving way too much credit to what happened early. It should be, and I think Sagarin didn't do this. I think Sagarin, weighted the more recent games, and as the further away you got away from the early season games, the less and less they mattered. Which is, to me, the way you really should be thinking about it. But anyway, all right. So now we go on to the big game on Saturday. Number 4, Marquette at number 1, UConn.
Oh, this is so hard. I like both of these teams a lot. Tyler Kolek has been on a tear.
Yeah, he could have been on. He could have been on Who's Hot.
He's been absolutely dynamic for the last month. I know they kind of played they didn't play during this win streak, they haven't played the top half or the top teams in the Big East, but I mean they still have been winning games. I almost want to take Marquette just because it's kind of the upset pick and they're playing good, but UConn to me is the best team in the country. I can't go against the Huskies, man. I'm taking UConn at home. If this was at Marquette, I might have had a little bit more conviction to go with the Golden Eagle, but I'm taking UConn.
I agree. All right, now we have number 6 Kansas, who can't win at home and can't win on the road and can't lose at home. At number 25 Oklahoma. Oklahoma's ranked again? What the hell? Thought we got rid of them.
I mean, they're benefiting, I think, of the parity of everybody's beating everybody.
They just got thumped. They just got thumped.
I agree.
Last night.
I mean, I had this conversation with my girlfriend because St. Mary's climbed all the way up to 18. They were 26 in the poll prior, the first team just out. And she was like, "We're 18." And I'm like, "Man, I'm sounding such an ass." I'm like, "You jump so much because everybody else can't help but fucking lose." Nobody can win more than 1 or 2 games in a row. And you guys have just happened to win 12. So they're like, "Well, shit, we can't not raise them." So I think it's kind of a similar situation where just when you want to see another team maybe creep in there, it's they lose too. And it's well, Oklahoma kind of lost, maybe not as bad. I don't know. I digress. Give me Kansas. They just got blasted, embarrassed. I know Self is probably hearing it about how they can't win from home. I think he cooks one up here. I also think Kansas is better than Oklahoma. Granted, I thought Kansas was better than Texas Tech. So I'll take the Jayhawks. I don't think they lose 2 in a row because they haven't all year.
Yeah, both teams were embarrassed, but not as badly as Kansas. Kansas basically just took a night off.
Yeah. Really bad.
So I can't use my since they lost, they're going to win theory because both teams lost. So I believe in this Kansas team more than I believe in this Oklahoma team for sure. But if Kevin McClure's not playing, for example, that could be problematic. I'm going to go with KU. I kind of agree with you, but depending on the injury situation, that could impact this game. All right, we have Utah State, which fell out of the rankings, at Colorado State.
I have no idea who to take in this game. I think both teams have been really solid. I mean, both of them are ranked. I mean, at one point Colorado was 13th. I don't think either team at any point in my mind has been in the teens good this year. Again, I think it's just been the rest of the college basketball world just beating itself up. They're literally right next to each other on KenPom. I was like, oh, maybe I can do my homework. I'm like, they're literally right next to each other. So I'm just gonna go with the home team. I'm gonna take Colorado State. Also, the Aggies have burned me now, I believe 2 or 3 times this year. Every time I picked them, they've lost. I'm almost positive. Which has been the case for a couple of teams. So
yeah, Colorado got thumped pretty good last night by San Diego State. So
Oh yeah.
if I use the losing theory, I got to go with Colorado State. All right, now we have a nice game. This is a good game, top 25 game. UK, number 22, at number 13, Auburn.
I still want to believe in this Kentucky team, which is rare for me. I normally don't with Kentucky. Um, I'm going to take the Wildcats as kind of their first big win in a while here. I think this is another situation where they kind of understand the moment, like, hey, we've lost 3 in a row at home, first time in decades. We kind of need a signature win to get on this resume. I'll take Kentucky, but I'm not overly confident in it. I think Auburn more for sure can win this game.
The strength of Auburn is pretty much Johni Broome. As we
Is
saw,
Trey Mitchell go?
huh?
Is Trey Mitchell going to play too?
Right.
That's
Is Trey
another
Mitchell going to
question.
play? We
Didn't
saw
think
those
that.
young centers be abused by EK. Johni
Yeah.
Broome could do something similar. They're going to have the home court advantage. So you said
I took Kentucky, but I
right.
kind of forgot that Mitchell wasn't still
Well,
could
you
be
could change it.
potentially
You
on.
could change it because I still have made up my mind.
Oh man. You know what? I didn't think about I think it's tough no matter what, but if Mitchell's been in and out, if he can't go, I'm gonna go Auburn. I'm gonna take Auburn. They're at home. Obviously, this is down the line. Mitchell could totally be cleared within the next couple of days, but if he doesn't go, I think they
Yeah.
might be. I just don't know if they have the front court ability to match up with Broome
Yeah, they
and this
certainly
Auburn
were
team.
bullied by Gonzaga.
Yeah,
They certainly have the length and the shot blocking
yeah,
with those 3 7-footers, but it didn't really seem to help them against Gonzaga. Um, I don't know. I just think that at some point this Kentucky team things are going to turn on for them,
yeah.
and it's going to be like, whoa, watch out for this team, you know, for the rest of the season. So, I'm that's the reason why I'm going with them. It's more of a gut feel than anything else. All right, now we have a first place in the Ivy League, Yale at Princeton, who had been in first place for a long time, but then lost to both Cornell and Yale. So yeah, and I will be at this game, Saturday night game.
I haven't seen Princeton play, but I've seen Yale. I like how I'm gonna take Yale. Again, I think this could go both ways. I think Princeton might be a little bit better, but I do like kind of Yale. I feel like just kind of plays a very solid brand of basketball that, in theory, should be able to travel well, and
I
they've
think
kind of been near the top.
these are the 2 best teams in the Ivy. Princeton needs this game to
Yeah,
stay in
for
the Ivy
sure.
League race. So only the top 4 in the Ivy League actually go to the Ivy League tournament.
Yeah,
So they eliminate the bottom half of the division. So if you don't finish top 4, you're not going to March Madness.
yeah.
So there you go. All right. Now we have another Mountain West debacle. This one's in state, Nevada at Nevada, Las Vegas.
I like give me the Wolfpack. I think UNLV's been surprisingly pretty competent this year. They had a good win against Creighton. Um, but like outside of that, I feel like they've kind of beaten. I know they just beat
New Mexico.
New Mexico, but like outside of those 2 games, I feel like they've kind of just beaten up on. Actually, no, they swept New Mexico this year.
Did they really? Wow.
They did. They did beat. That's right. They lost San Diego State. They beat New Mexico at home. Um, yeah, I'm gonna go Nevada. I think Nevada's been a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more competent year in and year like or game in and game out against competition. Um, Funny enough, they played Bethesda University, who we at Menlo played, and that team should not exist. I don't understand how that's even more than a rec league team. It was that bad, Rich, that bad.
Wow.
It's yeah. Anyways, beside the point. I'm gonna take the Wolfpack, but UNLV has been more competent than I expected. But I still think there's a little bit of fool's gold where it's like they've been pretty competitive, but I think the Wolfpack are better.
I think, yeah, neutral court, Nevada's better. I'm going to go with UNLV because they're home. I love another guy who could have been on our Who's Hot list is Dedan Thomas, the freshman point guard for UNLV.
Yeah.
He has just been electric. So there you go. We're splitting on that one. All right, Sunday. We got a pretty nice slate on Sunday. Yeah. We have Florida starting off with the battle of first place in the American. Number 24, Florida Atlantic at Southern Florida.
I'm going to take FAU. Now, in saying that, they're going to lose in like a triple overtime game by 1 at the buzzer because that's just been like their MO. But FAU, they're better, right? Like, I'm like, they're better. They're the better team, right? No, but like, I'm just saying it like they should win. And then this is, like I said, again, they're going to somehow go to like double OT and either win or lose at the buzzer. Just as has been the story of their season. But I'm taking FAU.
I have to. I'm not a believer in this South Florida team. I think they're going to start losing, and this is going to be a start of that. All right, we have Northwestern, who I previously mentioned, lost one of their better guards, Ty Berry, at Indiana. But Indiana's desperate for a win, and Northwestern right now is squarely on the bubble. So
I'm going to take Indiana because they're at home. They need a win. You lose Ty Berry. You know, Indiana hasn't been great this year, but I also don't think they've been horrible. I mean, they've lost to some really good teams. I mean, at one point they had to play Purdue. I think like Illinois and Wisconsin like 3 in a row and lost all 3, but like that's a tough slate. Anybody in the country could lose those 3 games in a row if you had to play them back to back to back. So I'm going to take Indiana at home against a team that just lost one of their more important pieces.
I agree. I'm going with IU. This is a kind of a game of size versus guard play, but losing Barry has to be going to have to hurt Northwestern in multiple ways. You know, emotionally, and it hurts their style of play. I'm going to go with IU. All right, Memphis at SMU. Here's the interesting thing: we know Memphis is teetering on the bubble. SMU is the computers like SMU, the second best of any team in the American. And they like, so like if you went by the computers, this would say SMU is winning this.
Yeah, I think I might agree with the computers here. Memphis team just has kind of bothered me all year. They should be better than they are. I think we can all agree with that. And the last time they faced off in Memphis, it was a game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, SMU is a solid team.
Yeah, I'm going to take SMU because I think SMU isn't. Memphis is better on paper, but the game's not played on paper. And this Memphis team has been so volatile that I think this SMU team might smell the blood in the water and go, we lost by like 4 at their place. We can definitely get them at home.
Yeah, I hear that. I'm going to go with Memphis, thinking this team has to start to play up to its potential. It's getting the do or die team. So I'm going to go with Memphis. We shall see. All right, now we have Seton Hall at St. John's. 2 teams that are kind of sputtering, especially St. John's.
Yeah, maybe like a couple of weeks ago, I would have probably been a little bit more confident in picking one way or the other. I'm going to take St. John's at home, though. I don't think either team is really spectacular. Like I said, they're not playing great right now, so I'll take the Johnnies at home.
Yeah, I'm going to go with St. John's at home as well. Even though, I mean, St. John's, very much like Memphis, I think are very much teetering on the bubble. They really need to get some good wins. And Patino really just can't. He's been tinkering with his lineup all year long. Can't seem to get the right combination of guys. He better figure it out. This team has got a lot of talent, but a lot of guys like Jordan Dingle, the transfer for Penn, are underachieving. Soriano, all of a sudden, he's not starting Soriano, was the centerpiece of this team early in the season. I'm going to go with St. John's to get it straightened out, partially because I have a grudge against Seton Hall. All righty. All righty. So now we move on to I won't say red hot Rutgers. I'll say hot Rutgers at Minnesota.
I'm going to say Rutgers keeps riding the wave here. I saw Minnesota play earlier this year. Wasn't super impressed in the game that I watched. I forget who I saw them play. Um, you know, Rutgers lost 3, won 3, but again, 2 of those losses were in a tough back-to-back where you play Illinois and you play Purdue. So I think like those are 2 games that nobody expected them to win anyways, especially with the Illinois game on the road. And then Purdue's been just kind of a buzzsaw this year. So I'm going to take Rutgers. I think they've got a little bit more in the tank as a team than Minnesota does.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. I picked Minnesota to beat Michigan State at home, and I was right about that. I was impressed with Cam Christie, the younger Christie brother, or the one who plays for the Lakers, unless he was traded. So I was critical of Cam Christie early on when they lost to San Francisco. I thought he just basically shot them out of the game, took bad shots, but hell, that was probably like his 5th college game or whatever.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
He's playing much better, has moved into our top 200. Another guy who could be on the Who's Hot list. I'm going to go with Minnesota here. I think this is really close, but I'm going to go with Minnesota with the home court. All right, so we have one more Sunday game, and we have Utah at UCLA.
I'm going to take UCLA home on this one.
Yeah, I am too. Utah really hasn't played great. I think they dropped 2 last week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think so.
These wins, if UCLA can do what I'm predicting them to do, beat Utah, and who did I say they would beat on Thursday? Colorado.
Colorado, yeah.
Man, that puts them right back in the running, for second place.
The Zags fan in me is wanting them to win as many games as possible. Could keep bumping up that quad ratio up there.
Right,
get that thing as close to a number 2, maybe even probably not a 1, but get that thing as up to number 2 as you can.
Right.
But yeah, I'm gonna go UCLA here. Like I saw Utah. I've seen them obviously like on TV because they're in the pack, but I saw them live against St. Mary's and they actually won that game. And I was actually pretty impressed at that time. But I think that was also a bit more of a testament to how bad St. Mary's was playing early in the year and the problems that I still think kind of the WBCC part of the schedule is hiding from that team. That's a different conversation for a different day. My girlfriend will kill me. She hears me talking bad on her Gales. I think there's a little bit of fool's gold there. Picking the crap out of Pepperdine, LMU, and Pacific doesn't wow me all too much.
Did you notice in the rematch, Pacific didn't put up many points again? They scored something like 47 or something.
I think it was 40. Yeah, it was under 50 for sure.
Yeah. So Pacific is really bad. All right. So final game, and I don't know why we haven't been doing Monday games before.
This one should be a banger of a game.
But I didn't want to miss this one. Iowa State, number 10 in the country, at number 3 Houston. If for those of you who remember, I actually, when we had this game, the earlier matchup between them, I went with Iowa State. Houston at the time, were they number 2 in the country? I think
they might have been
undefeated.
They were number 2 at the time. Yep.
Yeah. So here's the rematch.
Oh man. This one's hard. Because Houston, I always get a little nervous picking Houston because I'm like, is this going to be the game where they only score 50 points? Is this going to be the night that happens? But they're at home. They had that loss to Kansas where it wasn't really close. Kansas was pretty much in control most of the way. They've won their 2 cents. They beat Cincinnati and somebody else. Again, I'll take Houston.
That Cincinnati game, by the way, which we said would be close, was close.
Was close, yeah. Good, yeah. I'm going to take Houston. I wasn't really aware of this Iowa State team until a couple of weeks ago. Rich, you made the comment that you think this is a team that is like a year away from really putting it on people.
Being a Final Four contender, they're ahead of schedule for me.
Yeah, I'm like exactly and so I kind of started to follow, and since then I've become a fan and been very high on them as well. Kind of jumped on that bandwagon. I picked them a lot in the pick'ems here, but I think Houston gets this one at home.
You want to talk about a chucker? How about Jamal Shed?
Oh yeah.
Oh my
Oh yeah.
God. Heck,
That.
and that's the thing about Houston. If Shed and Cryer aren't hitting, where do they go for the offense?
They they don't.
Having said that, this team plays great defense. It rebounds well. We got the young Iowa State team going to Houston. Houston wants revenge. I think Houston gets it in another great game. So that wraps up our picks of the week, and we're going to wrap up the show. As always, I want to thank our listeners, and we didn't have a special guest, and I'm sorry Dante Maddox couldn't make it, but he will definitely be with us once the season's over. If you ever miss an episode, you can get caught up at hoopsprospects.com. Also, we didn't have a chance to look at the mailbag tonight because I thought we were going to be talking with Dante. Yeah, it doesn't matter. We didn't get to the mailbag. But if you want to send a question, please email it to admin@hoopsprospects.com. We also take questions via social media on Twitter @hoopsprospects, on Instagram @thehoopsprospects, and on Facebook @hoopspros. We will be back next week to talk more college hoops. Should be back on Wednesday of next week, I believe. We'll do the show on Tuesday, have it up on Wednesday. If all goes well. Any final thoughts, Drew?
I'm so ready for March after working a golf tournament. I'm ready for the real tournament. I hope that our coach and my bosses and everything aren't listening, but God, I'm so ready. It's what I live for.
We are less than 5 weeks away now.
I know it's coming.
So we're only going to have like 3 more shows before we do like our final 4, or our March Madness show. Yeah,
I'm so ready.
I hope we get a full host of people to pick the games.
Yeah.
So Jake is going to be back with us once in a while. He told me last week, and of course Caleb's going to be with us if it suits him.
Hopefully Cam makes the jump too.
No. I think Cam, I should say one thing. I'm always talking about the things that I say are going to happen and never do. NBA, I'm putting the NBA right now in Cam's hands. At least during while the college season's going on, I can't do both. I can't do NBA and college.
I have watched I watched the last NBA game that I watched wasn't even a full NBA game. It was the game where Steph hit that crazy like half court pirouette, turnaround, buzzer beating 3. Part of it is I'm just not interested in it, to be honest. I'm not. It's not very compelling to me right now.
Right.
Not with the way college basketball has been completely on its head. I mean, I think I saw something where this is the first time in years where unranked teams have a winning record when they go against ranked teams. Like throughout if that makes sense, like throughout the years.
That is incredible.
I think it just speaks to the parity. I mean, we're talking about it. You have teams like Gonzaga, St. Mary's wasn't ranked for a long time. Ole Miss, Texas, like teams that are not ranked that you're like, on any given night, would anybody be shocked if Texas beat somebody?
No.
Or Cincinnati beat somebody? Or Gonzaga beat somebody? Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I think Texas, and especially Cincinnati, should get like an award for close losses.
No, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like it's just interesting to me that like we're in a world where like teams like that can exist and not be ranked, and it's.
And you could go through. Look at Texas's lineup. I mean,
yeah,
Tyrese Hunter and Max Asmith at guard. You got Dylan Dessou and Dylan Mitchell at the forward spots, and then you got a bunch of role players. I mean, that's a terrific team, and they may not make the tournament.
Yeah, like those are the types of teams that like you don't want them to. No team wants to look at the 11 seed and see a Texas or a Cincinnati or a Gonzaga waiting for. Nobody wants that. I'm a fan, but nobody wants that.
Do you remember the year Wichita State like ran the table, I think, during the regular season?
And got screwed and played like an 11 seed Kentucky team.
No, they had to play Kentucky, and Kentucky won an 8-9 matchup. Kentucky was a 9.
It was
The
9 that year,
Wichita
yes.
State second round game, and we all knew Kentucky was so much better than a 9.
They got screwed that year.
Something like that is going to happen this year.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at the 1 seed, especially because Purdue and UConn are pretty much at this point, I think, locks, barring the wheels falling off. But those other 2 1 seeds, whoever they end up being, are going to have weaknesses. They're going to have flaws because every team does. And even Purdue and UConn, to a degree, UConn's not as deep as they were last year. They're still really good, but they're not as deep. And I think Purdue, until proven otherwise, is just kind of on upset alert. But it's like, I would be pissed if I was UNC and I finish up with a 1 seed and I look at my 9 spot or my 11, and I look at the 9 spot and I see Texas or Gonzaga, or I'd be pissed. I'd be like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, yeah, I had a better season.
I'm telling you, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
Oh yeah,
Somebody's gonna take major lump in the second round to a good 8-9 winner. Because usually 8-9 winners are like, their teams like, I don't know, like maybe like how Pittsburgh is this year,
or
Mississippi or whatever. Teams that usually when they play a good team they lose, but they've won enough to deserve to be in the tournament. And but yeah, this year I think there's going to be some 8-9s that are just going to be have Final Four potential.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. It's going to be an interesting selection Sunday because it's probably going to be the weirdest bracket I filled out in a while.
Yeah.
Where I'm going to have a couple 8, 9s, 10s, and 11s making.
Yeah, if you don't have a mixed, if you go with chalk this year, forget it.
Oh, you're screwed. You're screwed. You can take your Final Four. You can have 1-1, maybe 1-2, and you're probably going to have to throw like a 7, an 8, a 9, just to get crazy with it to have a chance.
Yeah,
it's going to be wild.
All
right, we're going to go grab dinner.
All right, sir. It was good seeing you. Well, see you next week.